Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Izuku Yagi was neglected and quirkless, but gained the Synthesist Quirk. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Chapter 1. The Synthesist Quirks. They've always been a fascination for me, not because I don't understand them, but because I've never had one. My name is Izuku Yagi, the youngest child of Toshinori and Inko Yagi. I'm part of a rare group in a world where 80% of the population possesses quirks, leaving only 20% quirkless. In my family, though, I'm the anomaly, the odd one out. I'm 12 years old and lately, it feels like life has hit rock bottom. Ever since the day our quirks, or lack thereof, were revealed, my parents' attention has gravitated toward my siblings. I can't help but feel overshadowed. Ichiro, my eldest brother, inherited the best of both our parents. With my mother's green eyes and my father's yellow hair and build, he's the perfect blend of their strengths. His quirk, Impact Drive, is nothing short of extraordinary. It amplifies his natural abilities exponentially, giving him unmatched strength, speed, agility, and durability. It's a power destined for heroism. Then there's my sister, Inori, the middle triplet, who looks more like my father with her blonde hair and blue eyes but carries my mother's delicate features. Her quirk, Mind's Reach, is equally impressive. She can manipulate objects with such precision and power that even heavy appliances like a fridge are effortless for her. However, there's a cost. Overusing her ability leaves her with debilitating migraines. And then there's me, Izuku Yagi, quirkless and seemingly insignificant. In a family of brilliance, I'm just there. Don't get me wrong. They would still feed me, but the attention that I received was nothing. I barely got any attention while my siblings received it all. They wouldn't listen to my suggestions. They wouldn't be there when I had something going on, but they were always at my siblings' side. At this point, if there was a fire inside the apartment, I am sure that I would have been forgotten in the building if it was burning down. I am not sure how I am going to do it, but I am determined that I will be a hero. I might be 12 years old, but I still have time to be better, stronger, and everything else in between. I was interrupted by my thoughts as I heard someone being pushed down. I looked to see Kaken pushing down a kid. Behind him were Inori, Ichiro, and some other of his friends. Kaken, or Katsuki Bakugo, was a name that struck both fear and frustration into my heart. He had always been a force to be reckoned with, a fiery personality paired with an explosive quirk aptly named Explosion. It wasn't surprising to see him bullying someone, it was practically a daily occurrence. What shocked me was the sight of Inori and Ichiro standing behind him, arms crossed and smirking. The boy on the ground looked younger than us, maybe 7 or 8. He had tears streaming down his face as he clutched a toy that Kaken was trying to rip from his hands. "Give it here, you little runt." Kaken barked, his palms crackling with small pops of energy. "Stop it, Kaken!" I yelled, stepping forward without thinking. My voice wavered slightly, but I refused to back down. Kaken turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Deku?" he sneered, using the nickname he had coined to remind me of how useless I was. I always hated that nickname. It was used so much that I am referred to by everyone as Deku, even the teachers. I grit my teeth, doing my best to ignore the sting of his words. I said, "Stop it." My voice cracked slightly, but I stood firm, taking another step toward Kaken. The boy on the ground was still crying, clutching his toy desperately to his chest as Kaken's explosive hands hovered over him, ready to cause more damage. Kaken scoffed. "Why should I listen to you, Deku? You don't even have a quirk." Inori chuckled sweetly at this. "Good point, I almost forgot," she said, lifting him with her quirk and throwing him to the side. I flew into the air and landed in a pond full of koi fish. I stood, dripping wet, eyes stinging from the water, my body shivering in the cold. I wanted to scream, but I kept it in, holding back the tears that were threatening to fall. I couldn't let them see that they were getting to me. I couldn't let them see how much it hurt. As I looked up, I saw Kaken, standing there with his hands still smoking from his quirk, a smug grin on his face. Inori and Ichiro stood off to the side, watching with detached expressions, not even flinching as I struggled to get out of the pond. They were just watching, like it was all some kind of game to them. Inori's voice rang out, sweet but mocking. "Oops, looks like you slipped, Deku," she said, crossing her arms, her gaze never wavering. "You really should learn to watch where you're going." Kaken grabbed the toy from the kid's hand and chuckled. "You know, I think I should teach you a lesson," explosions going off in his hands as he walked over to Izuku. "This is for meddling in business that isn't yours," he said as he sent a small explosion my way. I was hit by the front of the blast, sending me flying further. I slammed into the dirt, my body skidding across the ground, the force of the explosion leaving me breathless. I coughed, tasting the smoke in my mouth, and for a moment, I just lay there. My clothes were burned, my skin stinging from the blast. The world felt distant as if everything had slowed down. But the pain wasn't what hurt the most. It wasn't the bruises or the burns. It was the way they all stood there as if my suffering was just a trivial thing to be ignored. Kaken's laughter rang out above me. "You think you can stop me, Deku? You're nothing. You're just in the way." I slowly pushed myself up, my hands trembling as they scraped against the dirt. I could feel the tears threatening to fall, but I refused to let them show. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. "You're not the boss of me, Kaken," I muttered, my voice hoarse but firm. "You don't get to decide what I can do or who I am." Kaken paused, his smug grin faltering for a split second. But then he just scoffed and took a step closer, the sound of his explosions echoing with every movement. "I don't need to decide anything for you, Deku. You've already decided. You're nothing but a quirkless loser who doesn't even have the guts to fight back. You think you can be a hero?" His voice was dripping with disdain. "You're a joke. Yeah, little bro, quirks make the hero. Look at All Might, Endeavor and many others. They are who they are because of quirks. The three of us will likely be in the top 10 in the next decade or so. I would just give up on your dream if I were you," he said, walking over and looking down on him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own brother, Ichiro, was telling me to give up on my dream. My own family, the ones who should have been supporting me, were the ones trying to tear me down. But I couldn't let them. Not now, not ever. "I don't care what you say, Ichiro," I spat, my voice shaking but full of determination. "I'm going to be a hero, and nothing is going to stop me. Not even you." Ichiro's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of something, maybe doubt, maybe something else. But then, just as quickly, it disappeared. He stepped back, raising his hands in mock surrender, but his words were still as cutting as ever. "Fine, do whatever you want," he sneered. "But don't expect anyone to help you when you fail." Inori let out a soft, mocking chuckle. "Look at you, trying to act all tough, but you're nothing, Izuku. You'll never amount to anything. You'll always be just Deku." With that, the three of them walked away and I still stayed in the same spot. The attacks had launched me out of the playground, but not like that mattered anyway. I slowly got up in pain as I had hoped my clothes were fine. I looked down to see there were singe marks and a couple of rips in the shirt and breathes. "I've had much worse," I said to myself. I started to make my way home as there was nothing else to do. As I limped home, the sting of their words echoed in my mind. Quirkless, useless, Deku. The same insults, the same mocking tone. They had always treated me this way, as if I was invisible, as if I didn't even matter. But today, it hurt more than ever. Ichiro, Inori, Kaken, they were all so sure that I would never amount to anything. It felt like they had already decided my future for me, like I was nothing more than a shadow in their lives. But deep down, I knew they were wrong. I couldn't explain it, not to them or even to myself, but something inside of me kept telling me that I wasn't done yet. That despite everything, I had the power to change my fate. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But if I could just keep pushing, keep fighting, then maybe, just maybe, I would prove them all wrong. I made my way through the familiar streets of our neighborhood, my mind drifting to thoughts of heroes. All Might, Endeavor, the countless others who had shaped the world with their quirks. They all had something I didn't. They had power, strength, and abilities that made them stand out. But none of them had a dream like mine. None of them had the determination to become a hero despite the odds stacked against them. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to protect people, to be the one who stood up for those who couldn't defend themselves. I wanted to be the one who made a difference in the world. I just needed heart. I just needed to keep going no matter what. When I reached our door, I hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath before I pushed it open. The familiar warmth of the apartment greeted me, but it didn't feel the same. It felt distant, like everything was out of reach. I glanced at the living room, where my parents were sitting, watching TV. I went to my room to get changed for supper. The thing is, they didn't give a damn about this type of stuff. I told them once that Inori and Ichiro did this to me, and they didn't believe me. They are so wrapped up with their children with powerful quirks that they don't see any flaws in them. I went to the bathroom to get some bandages and wrapping for my injuries. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, carefully wrapping the bandages around the burns on my arms and the small cuts scattered across my body. My reflection barely seemed familiar to me. My face was a mix of dirt, water, and the remnants of the explosion, but it was the exhaustion in my eyes that stood out the most. I couldn't deny it anymore. The weight of their words, their indifference, it was all starting to take its toll. I finished wrapping my wounds, making sure the bandages were secure before heading back into my room. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, my eyes immediately drawn to the small stack of notebooks and papers on my desk. They were filled with all sorts of scribbled plans, calculations, and notes. Most of it was about heroes, how they trained, how they fought, and how they overcame their weaknesses. I had researched everything I could find on becoming a hero, but none of it seemed to matter without a quirk. I ignored those thoughts and headed downstairs to eat some dinner. Inori and Ichiro were already back as I pulled a chair up to the table. As I sat down at the dinner table, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was for Inori and Ichiro to laugh and joke around with our parents. They didn't even notice me as I quietly picked at my food, my eyes on my plate. I felt the familiar ache of being invisible. My parents were absorbed in the conversation, asking Inori about her latest training and Ichiro about his achievements at school. They asked how their quirks were progressing, congratulating them on their successes without a second thought. The silence at the table was suffocating, and I hated it. It wasn't that I didn't love my family. Actually, now that I think about it, did they truly love me? It was an honest question. It was a constant reminder that they didn't see me the same way. My own parents never asked about my day or my dreams. Instead, their conversations revolved around how much potential my siblings had and how incredible their quirks were. It felt like I didn't belong in this family, like I was just a shadow in the background. I quickly finished my food and made my way upstairs to my room to just decompress. I lay down on my bed and just looked up at the ceiling. The only thing in my room that made it vibrant was the few hero posters in my room, which were of All Might. Every hero deals with their own challenges. It's how you make the most of the good and the bad that makes you the person in the end, I said to myself. I said that every day to make sure that I never gave up. That was when I felt something strange. It was a pulling sensation in my head. No, my whole body. I felt like I drifted into consciousness as the pulling sensation continued. Third-person POV. Izuku opened his eyes to see that he was in an open area. He had no clue where this was, and he was slightly nervous. The area was blue mixed in with black, and it looked like it expanded on for miles. "Hello," he called out, but all he heard was the echo of his voice. He started to walk in a direction, hoping to find something that would show him where he was at. That was when something started to form right in front of him. It looked like pixels started to form right in front of him, and he stepped back slightly. The pixels started to form in the shape of something that resembled a human. Izuku stood frozen as the pixels in front of him swirled and shaped into a human form. The digital figure slowly solidified, its features becoming clearer with each passing moment. It eventually formed into a man with a suit and tie. He stood around 6'6" tall and looked more like a butler than anything. "Who are you?" Izuku stammered, his voice trembling, unsure whether he was dreaming or something far stranger was happening. You, my good sir, can call me Chase. My full name is Cognitive Human Assistance and Systematic Engine, but please call me Chase, he said in a British accent. Izuku stood there, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure in front of him was surreal, an entirely digital being that looked as if it had stepped out of a futuristic movie. The man, or whatever this entity was, smiled politely, but there was something unsettling about the whole situation. His polished suit and tie, his smooth features, all made him look like something out of a virtual reality simulation. Chase? Izuku repeated, still processing the situation. What is this place? Chase tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. This place, my dear Izuku, is a space between what I like to call mind space. Think of it as if we are in your head and before you ask you are currently sleeping, he said, projecting an image of himself on his bed. But what is this? He said, looking around. This is your quirk, my dear boy, he said, showing him the empty space. Your quirk is called Synthesist. You can create quirks. To put it simply, as he snapped his fingers, there's a matter of seconds. The space transformed itself into a home, and Izuku was sitting down with a cup of tea in his hand. Izuku sat there, completely bewildered, his fingers trembling around the cup of tea that appeared in his hands. The warmth from the drink didn't do much to calm his nerves as the surreal nature of the situation continued to unfold before him. The room around him looked cozy and familiar, a strange mix of comfort and disorientation. He glanced up at Chase, the figure who had just told him that his quirk was Synthesist. I can create quirks? Izuku repeated, still trying to wrap his mind around the words. But how? How is that even possible? I don't have a quirk. I'm quirkless. Chase smiled faintly, his hands clapped together in front of him, like a butler ready to explain some grand mystery. Ah, but you do have a quirk, Izuku, he said, his voice calm and measured, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The reason you couldn't see it before was because it's different. Unique, if you will. Izuku shook his head, trying to understand. But I've never shown any sign of having a quirk. My parents, my siblings. His voice faltered as he thought about how they had always treated him like an outcast. He felt like he was suffocating in the weight of their expectations, or rather, their lack of them. That is because your quirk needed years to develop. A little over 8 years since that day of the quirk exam, and now you have your quirk, he said, sitting in a chair across from him. So many questions. Izuku trailed off as he wiped his tears away. Most were from frustration, but also sadness, happiness, and anger. But if I can create quirks, how does it work? Izuku asked, his voice still shaky, but with a spark of curiosity in it now. What do I have to do? Chase stood up, walking around the room in a slow, deliberate manner. The process of creating a quirk, Izuku, is not as simple as snapping your fingers. It requires understanding. From this point on, anyone that you physically touch or vice versa will allow you to store the quirk's power, abilities, and knowledge of the quirk here, he said, showing him an area of empty shelves. Izuku wiped some more tears away from him as he tried to understand. Wait, so I copy the quirk, but I don't, he asked, confused. Chase gave a soft chuckle as if Izuku's confusion was perfectly normal. Correct, Izuku. You will store the quirk's power and knowledge, but you will not inherently copy the quirk to use. Think of it like a library of sorts. You will keep the ability to access it and understand how it works, but you will not permanently adopt the traits or powers of the quirk unless you choose to. You can pick and choose the ideas, powers, or abilities of the quirks to create your quirk. Oh, I see. How do I create a quirk? He asked, getting more and more excited. Well, once you have some quirks stored in here, you can pick and choose abilities in here to manifest and create it into being. If you even wanted, you could just use the quirk you copied. However, it is not as easy as it seems, he said, showing him to a big console. What do you mean? He asked, confused once again. Well, you see, there are restrictions to your quirk. You need to reach certain requirements and goals to create your quirk. For example, he said, pulling up a screen. You can't create one just yet as you need to go and make contact with someone. The other restriction of your quirk is you cannot copy and store the quirks in the library for people that you have a blood relation with, he said looking at him. Good, I don't need their quirks anyway, he said quieter than normal. Izuku sat back, absorbing what Chase had just explained to him. The idea of having the ability to create quirks, to store and understand them, was overwhelming. He never imagined that something like this could exist, especially not for someone like him who had always felt invisible in a world where everyone had a quirk except for him. The thought that he wasn't truly quirkless was both a relief and a source of fear. There was so much potential, but also so much responsibility tied to this newfound power. His mind raced with possibilities. What kind of quirks could he store? How could he use them? And why had it taken so long for his quirk to manifest? All these questions swirled around him, but one question stood above the rest. Could this truly make him a hero? Could he finally prove everyone wrong? Izuku nodded slowly, taking it all in. So, I'll need to find quirks first, right? To store them, I mean. Yes, that is correct. As I said before, from this day on, any physical contact and their quirk is stored here, Chase said. So, how can I come back to this place? Asked Izuku. Think of me in this place and you can come back here whenever you want, Chase said smiling. I should also let you know that time moves differently in here than out there, he said referring to the outside world. Really? Yes, indeed. Time moves 5 times slower here. If you are here for 5 hours, it will be 1 hour out there. Plus, you can be here when you are sleeping and still get rest for your body, said Chase. Izuku nodded, trying to wrap his mind around everything. The concept of storing quirks and creating his own was a lot to take in. His mind raced with excitement and uncertainty. For years, he had felt useless and powerless, and now he had the potential to change that. But there were still so many questions, so many things he didn't understand. So, if I store someone's quirk, I can use it to create my own, but it won't be like theirs. Izuku asked, trying to clarify. Chase nodded, his smile never faltering. Exactly. You'll have access to the knowledge, power, and abilities of the quirk, but you will have the freedom to modify and create something that is uniquely your own. Think of it as a recipe. You can take ingredients from different quirks, combine them, and create a dish that is entirely new. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. The idea of being able to make a quirk that was truly his own, shaped by the quirks of others, was something he had never imagined. It was like being given the power to forge his destiny, to write his own path in a world where the odds had always been stacked against him. But how do I choose which quirks to store? What if I make a mistake? Izuku's voice trembled slightly as the weight of the responsibility began to sink in. Chase smiled. That's the best part, you can store as many as you want. That, and when you can create a quirk, I will send a notification that only you can see saying that you can create a quirk. Izuku smiled at that. Well, thank you, Chase. I think I'm going to go to sleep for Rayal in the outside world. Sounds good. Good night, my dear boy, he said, patting his head as he was teleported out to get some sleep. Chapter 2, Quirk Creation. The next morning Izuku had some pep in his step and got his clothes on with some enthusiasm. He wanted to see what his family would think of him having a quirk. He walked downstairs to his family getting ready to eat breakfast. Inori looked over to her brother to see he was a lot happier. That annoyed her for some reason. What's up with you? She asked as she poured some milk into a glass. I got a quirk, he said smiling. Inori looked at him before snorting with that snort turning into a laugh. That is actually funny, she said wiping a tear away. Izuku's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly regained his composure. He had spent so many years longing for a quirk, a chance to prove himself, and now he finally had it. But hearing Inori's mockery stung. She always had a sharp tongue, and no matter what he did, it seemed like she was never going to take him seriously. Really? Inori scoffed, her eyes narrowing. And how are you going to prove that? You can barely get through a normal day without being a laughingstock. Do you really think you're special now? I didn't say I was special, he said, clenching his fist slightly. Inori used her powers to move the milk back to the fridge, and she still chuckled. Yeah, sure, I got to tell everyone this, as she went to the living room. Hey Mom, Dad, Ichiro, Izuku said he has a quirk, she said, still chuckling slightly. Ichiro started to laugh while Inko and Toshinori looked at him confused. His father set down his coffee cup, his brows furrowed. Are you sure you're not just imagining things? You're quirkless. Everyone knows that. This isn't something you can just change overnight. Remember your quirk exam? You were one of the only kids in your class who didn't even show a spark of power. It's just impossible. Izuku's hands tightened into fists, the sting of rejection sharp and familiar. He had spent years trying to ignore the shame of being quirkless, watching everyone around him grow stronger while he remained powerless. But now, with this new power, he thought he could finally show them. Show them that he was worth something. But here they were, dismissing him before he even had a chance to explain. I'm not imagining things. Izuku's voice cracked as he tried to hold his ground. Izuka honey, this isn't funny. If this is your idea of a joke, then you need to stop, said Inko sternly. Toshinori stood up as he walked to Izuku. For some reason, he had an intimidating presence, something he never felt from him at all. Agreed. There are late bloomers, which happen about a few months after your quirk exam, but you need to stop thinking you have a quirk. It's been years, so you will likely never get one, he said, glaring at him. Izuku stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of his father's words crashed down on him, and all the excitement he had felt moments ago seemed to fade into the background. He wanted to argue, to shout that he wasn't lying, but the coldness in Toshinori's voice made him hesitate. I'm not lying. Izuku's voice cracked with the desperation he had been holding back for years. I really do have a quirk now. It's not a joke. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Ichiro rolled his eyes, clearly enjoying the show. You're quirkless, Izuku. You always have been. Don't get your hopes up, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Toshinori sighed as he placed his hand on his shoulder. That is enough. We've had enough stress as it is that you never had a quirk, and we don't need this. This is like you having that dream to be a hero. You can't do it if you don't have a quirk. You would be much better off being a firefighter, policeman, or doctor. Now get going to school, he said sternly as he walked to the bathroom before he had to leave for work. Annoyed, tired, and sad, he grabbed his backpack and walked out the door. By the time Izuku arrived at school, his heart was still heavy, but he carried a sense of determination that he hadn't felt before. He knew that he wasn't truly quirkless and that knowledge gave him power that no one could take away. He walked through the gates, his eyes focused ahead. He could hear the usual chatter of his classmates, the sounds of laughter, the clatter of lockers being slammed shut. But none of it seemed to reach him. All he could think about was how to prove them wrong. How to show them that he wasn't the useless, powerless boy they thought he was. Classes went by normal until it was lunchtime. Izuku made his way to lunch just like normal when someone pulled out the door to the outside and dragged him behind it. Judging by the grip, he knew who it was. He was soon thrown down and looked up to see who it was. Oi Deku, growled Bakugo. Izuku scrambled to push himself off the ground, his palms stinging from the impact with the pavement. He looked up to see Bakugo standing over him, his usual scowl painted across his face. Kaken, what do you want? Izuku stammered, trying to hold his ground, but his voice wavered. He had hoped that things would be different now that he had a quirk, but he had no idea how to face Bakugo in this new reality. The last thing he wanted was another confrontation with the person who had always belittled him. Bakugo sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. You think you can just go around saying you've got a quirk now, huh? After all these years of being useless? You think you're suddenly gonna be some kind of hero? His voice was thick with disdain, and his eyes burned with the usual intensity. Yes, was all he said as he was punched in the face. That's bullshit, he yelled as he grabbed him by his hair. Izuku winced as Bakugo's grip tightened on his hair, pulling his head back painfully. His vision swam for a moment as the pain from the punch throbbed in his cheek, but the sting didn't deter him. The fire burning in his chest, the new power that he felt within himself, kept him from feeling completely defeated. I'm not lying, Kaken. Izuku gasped, struggling to free himself from the tight hold. I really do have a quirk now. Bakugo's eyes narrowed, and his lips curled into a snarl. Quit spouting that, see, Deku. With a brutal twist of his wrist, he slammed Izuku's head against the ground, sending another shockwave of pain through Izuku's skull. You're still quirkless. You're just pretending to be something you're not. You've always been useless, and that's not going to change because you say you've got a quirk now. You've been quirkless for years, Deku. Don't you dare try to pretend now like you're something special. Izuku stopped resisting as Bakugo hit once more for good measure. I don't want to ever hear you talking about that sheet again, you demon liar, he said, stomping away from him. Izuku lay on the ground, his face stinging from the brutal punches and his head spinning from the impact. His vision blurred, and he could feel the blood trickling from a cut on his lip. He barely had the strength to lift his head, but something deep inside him kept him from staying down. Even as Bakugo's harsh words echoed in his mind, a fire ignited in his chest, fueled by something more than the pain. He gritted his teeth and pushed himself up, shaking as he did so. His body felt like it was on fire, but not in the way Bakugo had intended. He could feel the surge of energy within him, the quirk that he knew he had, the one he wasn't imagining, wasn't lying about. Bakugo's taunts and physical punishment only made him more determined to prove himself. That didn't feel good, he said as he leaned against the brick wall for support. Whatever. Looks like I am going to miss lunch again, he said as he made his way to class. He made it with a few minutes to spare as he sat down in his usual seat, bruises already starting to form. He didn't give a DMN right now. He understands where they were coming from by not believing him that he didn't have a quirk, but they could at least listen to him. The rest of his day was about as pretty normal as it could get, but he was a bit fascinated about something. When he was walking home, something appeared to be in his eye or something, but an image or a screen of sorts appeared in front of him. Achievement. Complete. Collect and store 10 quirks in the library. Reward, 1 quirk creation available. This made Izuku excited as he started to make his way home faster. He wanted to get back into the mind space to work on quirk. He had wondered about many things such as how many quirks he could make and use. He wanted to get some quirks stored up, so he acted like he was bumping into people accidentally when he traversed the halls of the school. Some resulted in nothing, when others were throwing punches at him. He ran to his room not even to see his mom, as he was sure she wasn't there. He threw his stuff down and started to think about mindspace before eventually he was pulled back in. He was welcomed to the sight of Chase as he was smiling down at him. I see you are excited, sir. Shall we have some tea and see what quirks you have stored up, he said, forming the rooms for Izuku to use. We shall, Chase, he said excitedly. Chase, ever the calm and patient guide, gestured to the center of the room where a large, glowing screen materialized. It hovered in the air, flickering with different hues as it displayed an intricate list of quirks Izuku had collected. The screen was organized like a library catalog, each quirk listed with a brief description and a button next to it that Izuku could tap to access more detailed information. Izuku's fingers hovered over the screen. The potential to shape these quirks into something entirely his own was thrilling. The idea of being able to combine and manipulate powers was like nothing he had ever dreamed of. His eyes moved from one quirk to another, eager to explore what each one could offer. Shall we start from the beginning? Chase asked, his voice gentle and encouraging. Izuku nodded, his excitement palpable. Yes, please. So, for the first quirk, we have Explosion, belonging to a Katsuki Bakugo, said Chase. An image of Bakugo came up on the screen and Izuku frowned slightly. This was from the fight at noon. All right, let's do the next one, said Izuku, ready for what was next. Chase swiped to the next entry. Quirk number 2, Adhesion. The user can adhere to surfaces with their hands and feet. Simple, yet versatile. Izuku's face lit up. That sounds a lot like a spider's ability. It could be great for mobility or even stealth if used right. Indeed, Chase replied, pleased with Izuku's growing enthusiasm. Chase swiped to the third entry, the glowing screen adjusting as the next quirk appeared. The third quirk is Cerebral Enhancer, a quirk designed to enhance cognitive abilities dramatically. It allows the user to increase their IQ in proportion to their focus and effort, enabling accelerated problem-solving, strategic thinking, and memory recall. Izuku's eyes widened with excitement as he stared at the screen. An IQ boost? That's incredible. I can imagine so many uses for it. I could analyze situations faster, plan battles better, and even optimize how I train and use my quirks. This could really level the playing field. Chase nodded, his smile calm but proud. Exactly, sir. It has limitations, of course. While it can elevate your intelligence significantly, it also places a great demand on your mental energy. Overuse may lead to cognitive fatigue, headaches, or even temporary confusion. That sounds awesome. We will have to come back to that later, he said excitedly. Indeed we will. For your fourth quirk, we have Jolt. Not very powerful in terms of destructive power, but it allows the user to send out small amounts of electricity into their fingertips that reach about 6 inches. Izuku nodded, listening carefully as Chase described the fourth quirk. Jolt. Izuku mused aloud. That could still be useful, especially in a pinch. I could use it to shock enemies or short-circuit tech, maybe even give myself a boost in combat if used correctly. He considered how he could make the most of each quirk, turning every ability into an asset, no matter how small. Chase nodded. Exactly, sir. Even simple quirks like this have potential. Now for your fifth quirk. He swiped again, and a new quirk appeared on the screen. It went like this for the next few minutes. Izuku was fascinated with quirks, but in terms of overall usefulness, this was very incredibly specific. He knew quirks could be powerful if you trained them, so he would store off on the rest of them. Chase smiled at all of these quirks. Well, Sir Izuku, these quirks are indeed interesting, and now we have our final quirk, he said, pulling it up on the screen. Izuku was shocked at the man who was on his screen. He said, Toshinori Yagi with the quirk One for All. Izuku's mouth was drier than the Sahara Desert as he saw 2 images on the screen. Chase, why is All Might and Dad up on the same screen? He asked, hoping this wasn't going where this was going. Because Izuku, they are the same person, he replied to him. But, you said I can't copy my family's quirks because they are blood-related, he said, wanting answers. While that is true, it says here that One for All has been passed down to several people, he said, showing a screen of its past users. Izuku was holding his hand to his head. This was all too much to process. Why hadn't his dad ever told him or his family that he was the #1 hero? Izuku's mind was racing. He stared at the screen in disbelief, his eyes locked on the names of previous users of One for All, and then back to Toshinori Yagi's image, his father. His breath caught in his throat as he processed the information. All Might is my dad, Izuku whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible. His hands began to tremble. I never knew. Why? Didn't he tell me DMN it? He told me to give up on my dream of being a hero, because I didn't have a quirk. But he had one right here, something he was able to pass down the whole time, and he didn't even look my way to want to help me on my path to becoming a hero, he said as tears were falling down his face. Chase's voice was soft, as if he understood the storm of emotions swirling inside Izuku. I know this is a lot to process, Izuku, but this is your reality now. Izuku wiped his tears away in frustration as he looked at the screen once more. I think that I would like to examine all of the quirks and their abilities now, he said, trying to avoid the subject. Alright, sir. What kind of quirk were you thinking? He asked curiously. Izuku wiped away a few more tears as he looked at the screen. I was thinking something along the lines of an IQ quirk similar to the one earlier. Chase nodded thoughtfully, sensing Izuku's need to focus on something constructive. I understand. A quirk like that would be valuable, especially in helping you understand and MSTR all the quirks you've already collected. Let's go ahead and explore that route. The glowing screen flickered as Chase made a few adjustments. The list of quirks expanded, and the focus shifted to the Cerebral Enhancer quirk. A new window opened with a more detailed breakdown of its abilities. So, we already know what it does. What are the restrictions and cons of the quirk? That, and I would like to know how much the IQ is increased by, he said, putting a finger under the chin. Chase nodded with approval as he tapped a few controls, expanding the information on the screen for Izuku to examine. A new section appeared, labeled Cerebral Enhancer, Detailed Breakdown. Here are the specifics, Izuku, Chase began, his calm demeanor not changing despite the emotional weight Izuku was carrying. The quirk allows you to significantly enhance your cognitive abilities, which means your IQ can be increased by up to 100 points based on your focus and effort. This could theoretically push your intelligence into the genius category, enabling you to process information and solve problems much more rapidly. For someone like you, it would enhance your strategic thinking, combat tactics, memory recall, and even your understanding of quirks. Chase continued, however, as with all powerful abilities, this one does come with its drawbacks. The more you use it, the more mental energy it consumes. Extended use beyond your physical or mental limits could result in cognitive fatigue, memory lapses, and even temporary loss of coordination or confusion. In extreme cases, it could even lead to memory loss if overused, so it's essential to be mindful of your limits. What if we do not have those restrictions? How would this affect the quirk? He asked. I was hoping you would ask this. You see, sir, when creating a quirk, if you were to not have restrictions on a quirk, it would give you lower stats such as less power, he said as he adjusted the restrictions on the quirk. So, you will increase your IQ by only 40 points, however, you will be able to continuously have this quirk on at all times with no side effects whatsoever. It will be like you won't even feel it, he said, showing him. Izuku took a moment to absorb the information, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the choices before him. The prospect of enhancing his cognitive abilities without limits was undeniably tempting, but the reality of what such a decision would mean weighed heavily on him. His hand hovered over the screen as he thought it through carefully. 40 points isn't as high as the full 100, Izuku murmured, but being able to keep the quirk active all the time sounds like it could help me stay on top of everything. I wouldn't have to worry about cognitive fatigue or burning out. He glanced over at Chase, who was watching him with a calm, expectant expression. That's correct, sir, Chase said. The trade-off would be a slightly smaller increase in intelligence, but you would be able to maintain a consistently sharp mind without risking overexertion. You could always rely on your enhanced focus and analysis, without any downtime. Izuku nodded thoughtfully. That doesn't seem too bad, to be honest. What is my IQ now? Your IQ right now, as you are 12 years old, is currently. This means you would have a 163 IQ with this quirk. Your IQ will also increase as your brain is not fully developed yet, he said, smiling at him. Relieved, Izuku gave a decisive nod. Then that's what I'll do. Let's create the quirk with the 40-point boost and unrestricted use. Chase gestured to the glowing screen, and with a wave of his hand, the parameters were set. A swirling vortex of light appeared before Izuku, pulsating with energy. Chase explained, this is the creation process. Simply reach out and claim it, and the quirk will be yours. Taking a deep breath, Izuku stepped forward and extended his hand. The swirling light seemed to respond to him, wrapping around his fingers and seeping into his skin. A warm sensation flooded his body, and for a moment, his vision blurred. When it cleared, he felt sharper, like a veil had been lifted from his mind. How do you feel, sir? Chase asked, a hint of pride in his voice. I won't lie, I feel pretty much the same, but I do feel like something changed inside of me, he said, clenching his fist. Chase smiled warmly. Indeed, the effects may not feel immediate since the quirk enhances cognitive functions rather than physical ones. However, you'll start noticing subtle differences soon, clearer thoughts, faster problem solving, and perhaps a better understanding of complex situations. What shall you name the quirk, sir? He asked to write it down. Izuku nodded, still clenching and unclenching his fists as he adjusted to the newfound clarity in his mind. Already, he could feel his thoughts flowing more smoothly, like a river unobstructed by rocks. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was enough to make him feel sharper. How about brain boost? He said, smiling. I like it, he said, writing it down into the system. Well, now that we've taken care of that, what's next? Izuku asked, his voice was steadier than before. He was eager to channel his emotions into something productive. The revelation about his father still weighed heavily on him, but right now he needed focus. I believe you still have dinner to attend to, and after that, we can go over what. Chase smiled warmly. Indeed, the effects may not feel immediate since the quirk enhances cognitive functions rather than physical ones. However, you'll start noticing subtle differences soon: clearer thoughts, faster problem solving, and perhaps a better understanding of complex situations. Izuku nodded, still clenching and unclenching his fists as he adjusted to the newfound clarity in his mind. Already, he could feel his thoughts flowing more smoothly, like a river unobstructed by rocks. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was enough to make him feel sharper. "Well, now that we've taken care of that, what's next?" Izuku asked. His voice was steadier than before. He was eager to channel his emotions into something productive. The revelation about his father still weighed heavily on him, but right now, he needed to focus on what to do next, he said, bowing slightly. "That sounds good. When can I create my next quirk?" he asked curiously. "Not until you reach and meet this requirement," he said as he put it up on the screen. Chase's demeanor turned slightly more serious as he gestured to the glowing screen. "The requirement for creating your next quirk is simple but crucial, Instar Izuku. To harness your quirks effectively, your body needs to be in peak condition. It's not just about mental sharpness but physical readiness too. You'll need to meet this prerequisite before we can move forward." Izuku squinted at the screen, reading the text carefully. Apply for a gym membership, get a job, and commit to a consistent workout routine for 3 months. He frowned, feeling a pang of hesitation. "A job? At my age? Isn't that going to be difficult?" Chase's expression softened. "Not at all, sir. Plenty of opportunities exist, even for someone your age. It's not just about earning money, though that will help you gain independence. It's also about learning discipline, time management, and responsibility, skills that will serve you well as a hero. Not to mention, your quirks will place an immense strain on your body. Enhancing your physical endurance, strength, and agility will ensure you can wield them effectively without injuring yourself. Think of this as laying the foundation for your future success." "Thank you, Chase," Izuku said with a small smile. "I think this is going to make a big difference." Chase nodded, his expression calm and reassuring. "You're welcome, sir. Remember, this is only the beginning. But get going to dinner. You have been here for about 3 hours, meaning that it has been 36 minutes out there," he said. With that, Izuku went back to the real world and sat up from his bed. It might have been less than 24 hours since he acquired his quirk, but it sure was going to be a while before he could get used to that. He then remembered All Might and his father being the same person. He still was so set off. He never felt like this before. He felt betrayed by his father. The same man who had been quirkless at one point told him that a quirkless person could not become a hero. What an a-hole. He made it downstairs to see his family were just sitting down to eat as his mom was dishing up food for herself. He sat down and slowly got his food. Inori and Ichiro started to talk about their day. Izuku was staring at his father, not with a glare, but with a calculating, cold intensity that unsettled even him. It was the look of someone who was assessing every action, every word, and every possible motive. All Might, his father, Toshinori Yagi, noticed the look but chose to ignore it, engaging in light-hearted conversation with Inori and Ichiro instead. His siblings' laughter echoed in the dining room, but to Izuku, it sounded distant. His mind was too busy swirling with thoughts. How could he say something like that to me? He thought bitterly. How could someone who claimed to care about me so much dismiss my dreams as impossible, all while hiding his identity? The betrayal simmered just beneath his otherwise calm exterior. He wouldn't lie when he said he was curious as to how this skinny blonde man who was barely 5'10" tall was All Might. One for All must have been one heck of a powerful quirk, and he would have to investigate it. "That's some good progress, Inori," said Inko happily. Izuku shook his head at this. Conversations like this were starting to bother him more and more because he was never asking about how his day went. He finished eating and started to make his way up to his room. He had a lot of research and a lot of catching up to do. Chapter 3, Training Begins. 1 month later. "And that is another $100, he said, sighing. $100 was enough for a 1-month membership at the local gym. Yes, it was local, however, it was a gym with a pool, a track, mixed in with a dojo. It was the real package and why it was so expensive, and he was glad to be going there. Izuku had managed to secure an online job as a customer support agent for a tech company. It wasn't glamorous work, but it allowed him to contribute financially to his goals while maintaining flexibility with his schedule. He worked a few hours each day after school, answering queries about troubleshooting software issues and helping customers navigate their products. While the work was sometimes repetitive, it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Each paycheck brought him closer to achieving his plans. Sitting at his small desk, Izuku adjusted his headset and glanced at the queue of support tickets. The first was a customer struggling with a frozen application. He quickly reviewed the troubleshooting script, then typed out a concise, polite response. "Thank you for reaching out. Here's what you can try to resolve the issue." He hit send and moved to the next ticket. Despite the monotony, Izuku approached the job with the same determination he applied to everything else in his life. He saw it as more than just earning money. It was an opportunity to refine his communication skills, practice patience, and strengthen his ability to solve problems under pressure. By the end of his shift, Izuku leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. It wasn't the most physically demanding work, but staying focused for hours on end was draining in its own way. Still, when he looked at the total earnings in his online account, he felt a swollen feeling of pride. It wasn't just about the money, it was proof of his growing independence. He had created a schedule with Chase with the best interest in mind, and good God did it look like hell. 4 a.m. wake up, 4:30 a.m. to 7 a.m., first gym workout. 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. school. 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. work. 6 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. dinner. 6:45 p.m. to 10 p.m., second gym workout. 10:30 bed and mind space studying. Would it be hard? Was he willing to do it? Absolutely. Izuku sat on his bed, staring at the schedule Chase had meticulously crafted. It was rigorous, but it aligned with his goals. If he wanted to become a hero despite the odds stacked against him, he needed to push beyond his limits. He read through it again, committing it to memory before placing it carefully on his desk. The next morning, his alarm buzzed at 4 a.m., jolting him awake. For a split second, Izuku considered rolling over and stealing a few more moments of rest, but he quickly shook the thought away. He had made a commitment to himself, and if he started slacking now, he'd only be sabotaging his own future. Throwing on his workout clothes, he grabbed a water bottle and headed out the door. He wasted no time getting into the gym and started to get to work. He did a warm-up of 20 push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and crunches, and he was ready to go. Granted, he had never really done super physical workouts, so had taken some baby steps. The gym was relatively quiet at this early hour, save for a few other dedicated individuals. Izuku began on the treadmill, setting a moderate pace. His legs burned within the first few minutes, but he reminded himself of why he was doing this. Heroes don't quit. If I can't push past this, how will I ever keep up with villains in the field? After 20 minutes on the treadmill, he transitioned to weight training. Chase had given him a beginner's guide to proper form and manageable weights to avoid injury. Izuku started with dumbbell curls and bench presses, his arms trembling slightly under the unfamiliar strain. Despite the challenge, he felt an undeniable sense of satisfaction with every rep completed. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he pushed himself further than he ever had before. By the time he moved on to core exercises, he was already feeling the effects of the morning's work. Planks, Russian twists, and leg raises tested his resolve, but Izuku grit his teeth and kept going. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop, but he countered each thought of doubt with images of his future, standing tall as a hero who could save lives and inspire others. When the clock struck 7 a.m., Izuku finally wrapped up his session. His muscles ached, and his body was drenched in sweat, but he felt an overwhelming sense of pride. He had survived the first step in his grueling journey. As he walked out of the gym, the cool morning air hit him, refreshing his exhausted body. "One step closer," he muttered to himself, a small smile forming on his lips. The next part of his day proceeded as planned: school. Balancing academics with his new physical regimen was no easy task, but Izuku knew he couldn't afford to let his grades slip. He paid close attention in class, furiously taking notes and mentally organizing his study schedule for the evening. Every now and then, his classmates would notice his slightly tired expression, but none of them commented on it. By the time school ended, he felt drained but kept his focus sharp. After all, he still had work to do. Logging into his customer support job from his bedroom, Izuku handled each ticket with the same meticulous care as before. The repetitive nature of the work might have deterred others, but Izuku treated it as a mental workout way to sharpen his problem-solving skills and maintain his composure under pressure. Dinner was brief as usual, with his family's conversations revolving around Inori and Ichiro's day. Izuku ate in silence, his mind racing with plans for his next workout session. He caught glimpses of his father from across the table, but the calculating, cold intensity in his gaze remained. Tashinori noticed but continued to feign ignorance, a choice that only deepened the tension between them. After excusing himself, Izuku returned to the gym for his second workout of the day. This time, he focused on different muscle groups to avoid overworking in any one area. He tackled the rowing machine and the squat rack. This place was a lot more at this time, but he didn't mind that. He did feel like he was being watched though. He wasn't sure who was watching him, but it was someone doing it. He ended the workout and was going to the locker room when someone stopped him. "Hey, you're Izuku Yagi, right?" Izuku looked up to see a modestly tall man standing near the locker room entrance. His hair was dark brown, a little messy, but it looked like it had been styled intentionally, with streaks of gray peeking through the edges. He wore a black long sleeve and sweatpants, his body showing signs of experience with physical activity, muscles not overly bulky but lean and well-defined, a clear indication of someone who had spent years in training. His face was weathered, perhaps by time, but there was something about his presence that commanded respect. "Yeah, that's me," Izuku replied, his exhaustion making his voice slightly strained. "Is there something I can help you with?" The man gave him a friendly, knowing smile, though there was an underlying seriousness in his eyes. "I've been watching you for a while. You've been coming in here pretty regularly. Most people would burn out by now, but you've got something about you. DSPLN. Dedication." Izuku blinked in surprise, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he shifted his weight nervously. He wasn't used to strangers noticing him like that. I'm just trying to get better. For my goals, you know? This is my schedule," he said, showing him. The man nodded pleasantly. Yes, I know you are and can see that clearly, but I should introduce myself. My name is Daichi Arai," the man said, extending his hand. Izuku hesitated for a moment before shaking it, feeling the firm grip of someone who had clearly spent years honing their strength. "I own the dojo that's attached to the fitness center here," Daichi Arai said, gesturing toward the far end of the gym where the dojo's sliding wooden door stood. "I couldn't help but notice your work ethic. It's not every day I see someone so young pushing themselves so hard. You remind me of someone I used to know." Izuku looked at Daichi with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Oh really? Was he a hero?" Arai chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Not exactly. But he had the heart of one, much like you seem to. Listen, Yagi, I've been around long enough to recognize potential when I see it. You've got a fire in you, but if you're not careful, that fire can burn you out. Training is good, but training smart is better." Izuku's cheeks turned slightly pink. I'm just trying to catch up. I've got a lot of ground to cover." Arai nodded knowingly. "I figured as much. That drive of yours is admirable, but if you're serious about achieving your goals, you'll need guidance. Pushing through pain and exhaustion can only take you so far. If you want, I'd be willing to help you. Teach you how to balance your training, refine your technique, and maybe show you a thing or two about martial arts. It's up to you." The offer caught Izuku off guard. He wasn't sure how to respond at first. He had always been wary of accepting help, especially now that he had decided to forge his path independently. But there was something about Arai's presence, his calm confidence and the wisdom in his eyes, that made Izuku consider the proposition. "That's a generous offer," Izuku said cautiously. "But I don't have a lot of money right now. I'm already stretching my budget just to be here." Arai waved a hand dismissively. Don't worry about that. Consider it an investment. I see potential in you, and I'd hate to see it go to waste because of something as trivial as money. All I ask is that you show up ready to learn and give it your all. Deal? Izuku hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Deal. Arai's grin widened. Good. We'll start tomorrow evening, based on the schedule you showed me. Come by the dojo, and I'll introduce you to the basics. It's not going to be easy, but then again, I think you already know that. I do, Izuku replied, his voice firm. And I'm ready. The next evening, Izuku stood in front of the dojo's entrance, his nerves tingling with anticipation. He slid open the wooden doors and was greeted by the faint scent of wood polish and the soft light filtering through paper lanterns. The dojo was a stark contrast to the bustling gym, quiet, serene, yet filled with an underlying intensity that made his heart race. Arai stood in the center of the room, wearing a black martial arts gi with a white belt tied around his waist. You're on time. That's a good start, he said, gesturing for Izuku to join him. Izuku stepped onto the polished wooden floor, feeling the cool surface beneath his feet. What's the first lesson? Arai crossed his arms, his expression serious. The first lesson is understanding your limits and learning how to extend them without breaking. You've got raw determination, but that alone isn't enough. You need control, focus, and adaptability. Today, we'll start with the basics of movement and balance. Should we get to know each other first before then? He asked, wondering who this man was. Of course, he said, sitting in a crisscross position just as Izuku did the same. Daichi Arai adjusted his posture, sitting straight and exuding a calm yet commanding presence. He looked at Izuku with a small smile. You're right. It's always good to understand the person you're trusting to teach you. Let me tell you a bit about myself. Izuku nodded, settling into his seat. He was curious about this man who had taken an interest in him. Well, you know my name already, but I am a retired hero who just trains martial arts now. My quirk is triple joint. There are people who are double joint naturally, which was me, but my quirk added another joint, making me triple jointed. It allows me to extend and manipulate my body in ways most people can't, Arai continued, his voice calm yet infused with an undertone of pride. I can bend, twist, and maneuver my limbs to an almost impossible degree. It gave me a unique edge in combat situations, dodging attacks, striking from unexpected angles, and even escaping tight spots. But it wasn't just my quirk that defined me as a hero. I worked hard to refine my physical capabilities and tactical skills. A quirk is just a tool. How you use it determines your success. Izuku leaned forward, intrigued. So, you were a hero? What happened? Why did you stop? Arai's expression softened, a flicker of nostalgia passing over his face. I was a hero for about 15 years, operating under the name Elastic Shadow. I specialized in rescue operations and non-lethal takedowns. I even made it to number 73 on the hero charts, but as time went on, the toll on my body and mind became more apparent. Every fight, every mission, it all adds up. I decided to retire before I hit a point where I couldn't keep up anymore. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. Now I focus on teaching others, passing on what I've learned to people like you. Izuku nodded, his respect for Arai growing. That's admirable. I think it's great that you're still helping people in your own way. Arai chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the edges. You remind me of myself when I was younger. Hungry to prove myself, eager to learn. But let me ask you this, Yagi. Why are you doing this? What's driving you to push yourself so hard? Izuku hesitated, his gaze dropping to the polished wooden floor. Took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. I want to catch up. For a long time, I felt like I was always behind, always struggling to prove my worth. I want to change that. I want to be someone who can stand tall, someone who can protect others and make a difference. But I know I can't rely on anyone to hand me the tools to do that. I have to earn it. Arai nodded thoughtfully. His expression was unreadable, a noble goal. But let me give you some advice, Izuku. You're right to want to rely on yourself, but don't let that turn into isolation. The world is full of people who can teach you, guide you, and challenge you to grow. You're here now, which means you're already taking a step in the right direction. Izuku felt a wave of warmth at Arai's words. It wasn't often that someone acknowledged his efforts so directly. Thank you, Arai-sensei. I won't waste this opportunity. Arai smiled, standing up and gesturing for Izuku to follow. Good. Then let's get started. First, I'll assess your natural movement and balance. Take your shoes off and stand in the center of the mat. Izuku quickly complied, feeling the cool surface of the mat under his feet. Arai circled him, observing his posture and stance with a critical eye. Not bad, Arai said after a moment. You've got a decent foundation. That tells me you've been paying attention to your form during your workouts. But combat isn't about standing still. It's about adapting to ever-changing circumstances. Let's see how you move. Arai began by walking Izuku through a series of basic simple steps, shifts in weight, and maintaining balance while moving. Though the exercises seemed straightforward, Izuku quickly realized how much focus they required. Every step needed precision, every shift in weight demanded awareness of his center of gravity. Your movement is stiff, Arai commented after a while, his tone not unkind but firm. You're focusing too much on doing it perfectly. That's good in training, but in real scenarios, hesitation can cost you. Try to flow naturally. Don't think, feel. Izuku nodded, adjusting his approach. He loosened his stance, trying to let the movements come more intuitively. It wasn't perfect, but he could already sense an improvement. Better, Arai said with a small nod. Now, let's add some complexity. The session progressed with increasingly challenging exercises. Arai introduced basic martial arts stances and transitions, emphasizing the importance of staying grounded and maintaining fluidity. He demonstrated how small adjustments in posture could make a significant difference in balance and power. Martial arts isn't just about punching and kicking, Arai explained as he demonstrated a series of sweeping motions. It's about understanding your body and how it interacts with the world around you. If you can master that, you'll find strength in even the simplest movements. By the end of the lesson, Izuku was drenched in sweat, his muscles burning from unfamiliar motions. But he felt exhilarated. Each technique, each correction, had opened his eyes to a new dimension of training. This wasn't just about building strength, it was about refining it, channeling it into something precise and effective. You did well for your first day, Arai said, clapping a hand on Izuku's shoulder. But this is only the beginning. If you want to see real progress, you'll need to commit to consistent practice. Are you ready for that? Izuku looked up at Arai, his green eyes blazing with determination. Yes. I'm ready. Arai grinned. Good. Then we'll meet here tomorrow. Rest well tonight, Yak. You've earned it. As Izuku left the dojo, the cool evening air greeted him once more. His body ached, but his spirit felt lighter than it had been in months. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was truly moving forward. The path ahead was still uncertain, but with Arai's guidance, he knew he wasn't walking it alone. One step closer, Izuku muttered to himself, the faintest hint of a smile playing on his lips as he disappeared into the night. He got home to everyone in bed, which was about what it was like every night since he had been doing this, which was fine with him. He went to the fridge to get some chicken and rice and walked to his room. The unique thing about Mindspace was he was still able to get a full 6 hours of sleep if he wanted to, even when he was in Mindspace, because his body was resting. Izuku collected a few quirks from the past month, and he started to see a trend with the quirks that he had stored up. Based on what he was hearing, a lot of people firmly believed that they could not be heroes with the quirks that they possessed. He had a total of 14 storage now, and most of them were not trained enough. Granted, they were simple, such as having long fingers and pulling eyes out of your socket, which was gross in his opinion, but he didn't think of a use for them yet. The kid who had the quirk, Sparks, was interesting though. It said that the quirk could have gotten much stronger if it was trained constantly, but the kid never did anything. It made him wonder how many people with weak quirks could be powerful if all they did was train them. His siblings or parents hadn't caught on to the fact that he was starting to train more and more, but nonetheless it still hurt that they didn't believe that he had a quirk now. He had thought that someday if he had gotten a quirk that he would have gotten the recognition he needed from his family, but he thought life had other plans. The bullying hadn't stopped yet and he seriously doubted that it never will, but it irked him to no end that Inori and Ichiro were still doing it to him. He had told himself constantly that there are other people who have it worse than him out there, but it was getting harder and harder to believe every day. He will admit though that with the training he's been doing on his body it was starting to hurt less and less if the kids beat him up. He was grateful for that. Then there was the thing about One for All and his father being All Might. He hadn't read its profile or contents yet in Mindspace because he was still mad at his father for not telling him or his family. He knew without a doubt that his mother knew who he was, but his siblings likely didn't know either. Now Izuku knew that his neglect could have been much worse, granted it SE, but he could have been thrown out of the house and left on the streets to rot. He knew that he had a roof over his head and meals provided to him, but there was no attention whatsoever from his family, and at the end of the day neglect is still neglect. He decided that he would push away for now because he and his siblings didn't know of his father's identity. He had finished eating the meal that he had brought from the fridge and decided to go into his mindspace once more. He was still mad at his father, but he was curious to read the contents of One for All. He wanted to know what made the man so powerful that he was the #1 hero, though he was not sure if he wanted the quirk for his own. He was soon standing next to Chase as the two of them looked at the screen. Izuku held the book that said, One for All, on the front cover and sighed. Let's see what we are working with, he said as he placed the book on the holder, connecting it with the screen. One for All, Chase began, reading from the screen, is a quirk born from the fusion of two abilities, one to stockpile power and another to transfer that power to others. Over generations, it has passed from wielder to wielder, growing stronger with each succession. It's a unique blend of raw strength and inherited will. Izuku's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. So, it's not just strength? It carries the legacy of everyone who's ever wielded it. Exactly, Chase replied, pointing at the screen. Each user has contributed to its growth, both in power and knowledge. But it's more than just physical. It's about ideals, protecting those who can't protect themselves, standing against overwhelming odds. The screen cut to show the users of One for All. Many of them were heroes Izuku had never heard of before. This explains why Dad is the strongest, if the quirk can continually stockpile power. Izuku was analyzing the quirk with fascination now because the overall potential of this quirk is amazing. If he were to implement this into the quirks that he made, they would be much more powerful and would have more use. Chase smiled as he looked at Izuku with a thoughtful expression. I see you are thinking about adding this to your quirks, he said. It's hard not to when you see this much power with it. But I am also set at my dad right now, he said, smiling at the possibilities. You need to be careful though. If you are creating a quirk and then add the One for All's potential, then you could damage yourself from the amount of stockpiled power, he said as he generated a pot of tea for Izuku. Izuku took the cup of tea that Chase had generated for him, the warmth seeping into his hands. He took a slow sip, thinking about Chase's warning. Yeah, I get it. I can't just dive into this without considering the consequences. But it's hard not to be excited about the potential. Chase nodded. His expression is more serious now. It's good that you're excited, but you need to be aware of your limits. One for All may give you more power than you've ever imagined, but power is a double-edged sword, he said. Yeah, he said as he looked at Chase. Say, Chase, what are you? He asked. Think of me as an artificial intelligence to you, quirk synthesist. I am here to help you with a lot of the complexity of this quirk so that you can learn the quirks you create, he said. That makes sense, he said, sipping some tea as he investigated the corner of the screen. He hit the screen, and it showed that they were quirks from past users of One for All. Izuku leaned in closer, his eyes scanning the screen as it displayed a list of quirks from past users of One for All. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Each user had contributed their own unique ability to the quirk, and it seemed like each of them had made One for All even more formidable than it had been in its previous form. Some of the quirks were powers that Izuku had never even imagined could exist. It was clear that One for All was not just a simple strength-boosting quirk, it was a collection of abilities, each one adding its own flavor to the whole. He pointed to one of the quirks listed on the screen. What's this one? Float? Looks unusual. Chase's expression softened as he looked at the screen. Pious. That quirk belonged to one of the former users. It allows the user to float or levitate, defying gravity. It's a quirk that pairs very well with strength, especially in battle, since the user can move freely and avoid attacks. It was a key ability used by the previous wielder of One for All to outmaneuver opponents. Izuku was amazed. He could already see how powerful it would be to combine a strength-enhancing quirk like One for All with something as versatile as float. The possibilities were endless. He scrolled through the rest of the quirks, each one more fascinating than the last. Black Whip, Smokescreen, Danger Sense, FA Gene, and Gearshift. All of them were amazing. He was honestly debating on just using the quirks as they were rather than finding a way to make them better because most of them couldn't be made better. The next few hours in Mindspace were spent nitpicking the quirks to see what he could do with them and if they could be improved. But before they knew it, he had been there for almost 5 hours, which was about an hour of real time. Alright, Chase, I am going to go to get some actual sleep now as he started to teleport out of Mindspace, he said waving. Sounds good, sir. Have a good night rest, he said before he teleported out fully. 2 months later. It had been 3 months since he started his training and Izuku couldn't be happier. His skinny frame was slow but surely filling out into a leaner and more muscular one. Arai had taught him quite a bit in martial arts and was glad he was done with some of the training he had him do. Arai-sensei had drilled it into his head that flexibility is something every hero should know, and every day, there was a minimum of 20 minutes of it. Izuku rubbed his inner thigh in pain. He still remembered when he had him to the splits for the first time. He felt like he couldn't walk right for weeks, but thankfully it barely hurt anymore. His job was also going well for him too. He went from earning $15 an hour to now making $18 an hour, which he was all for. As he walked up to the school, he thought that his progress in academics was going to worsen from his training schedule, but as it turns out, they got better. He went from being in the top 15 in the school to he was now in the top 3, with 2 of the other students having IQ quirks much stronger than his brain boost. He also found out that anything that he was touching with his body when entering Mindspace he would bring in there. So, he started to bring in multiple books for reading, allowing him more time to learn. He started to read into topics of mathematics, biology, chemistry, physics, and technology, often using Mindspace to digest the material more quickly. The more he absorbed, the better he became at applying it in real life. His ability to multitask had improved, and he felt his mind growing sharper with each passing day. As much as he enjoyed his physical training, the mental side of his development was equally important. If he could understand the complexities of the quirks he was working with, he could learn to assess them more effectively. He was almost at class when he was tripped in the hallway. Izuku looked up to see it was Nori, Ichiro, and Bakugo waiting a few doors down from their class. Oops, said Bakugo smirking. Izuku just stared at him, picked up his things, and started to walk to class when he was called out again. Don't ignore me, you fucker, yelled out Bakugo. He kept his head down and continued to walk toward his class, hoping that Bakugo and the others would just let it go. Something that was getting annoying to him was this. He started to stop talking to them unless it was needed. He still told them the same thing, that he was going to be a hero every time they brought it up. As he said before, the pain was lessening from their blows, which meant that he was getting stronger. Thank God they stopped talking about how he lied about having a quirk. But Inori wasn't done. She stepped into his path, blocking his way with a smug grin on her face. What's the matter, Deku? Finally learned how to walk with your head up. She laughed, and Ichiro snickered behind her. Izuku could feel his frustration building. The constant teasing and bullying had become an exhausting routine, and though he was getting stronger physically and mentally, it still hurt. He could see them, but he refused to let them see how much their words affected him. Move, Izuku muttered, his voice low, but firm. Oh, you think you're tough now, huh? She said mockingly with her hands on her hips. Izuku gritted his teeth slightly and put his hand on Inori's shoulder to surprise her. With a hard push, she was shoved face first into the lockers, making a loud thud. Ichiro and Bakugo were wide-eyed at that. Never in their lives had they seen Izuku lay his hands on someone like that. I said to move, he said coldly, walking into the classroom. Inori looked at him and saw that he wasn't having it today. She was fine by all accounts, because it didn't feel like he wanted to hurt her, but it still was an act of aggression. Inori glared at Izuku as he walked away, her face flushing with embarrassment and anger. She pushed herself off the lockers and stomped after him, but Ichiro grabbed her arm. "Let it go," he muttered, his eyes still wide with shock. "Let's deal with it later," he said. Inori looked at Izuku as he sat down and gritted her teeth. She would show him who he just messed with. Izuku didn't pay much attention to the event, but he knew the fact that he just pushed his sister like that meant it was starting to get to him. He didn't think much of it as the rest of the day transpired. He checked out a few more books to read from the library and started to walk out the school grounds. He just zips up his backpack when he was grabbed by the hair and thrown into the alleyway and pushed to the ground. Izuku landed hard on the rough pavement, his breath leaving him in a sharp gasp. He scrambled to get his bearings and looked up to see Bakugo, Inori, and Ichiro standing over him. The dim light of the alley cast ominous shadows across their faces, amplifying their expressions of anger and disdain. "You think you're tough now, huh, Deku?" Bakugo sneered, cracking his knuckles as small sparks of his quirk danced across his palms. "You don't get to push Inori like that and walk away." Izuku stood up slowly, pointing at her. "I told her to move." Inori gritted her teeth as she activated Mind's Reach and lifted Izuku off the ground. "You don't just get to do that to me. You need to be taught a lesson," she said, waving her hand and slamming him face first into the wall. Izuku felt his nose popped, meaning that it broke. Izuku gritted his teeth as blood streamed from his nose. The pain was sharp, but it wasn't enough to deter him. Inori slammed him into the other way face first, once more breaking it more. Izuku resorted to breathing out of his nose now but still tried to resist. Inori stopped her telekinesis and dropped him down, hitting the ground hard. Izuku tried to get up but was in Inori's grip, once more being pinned against the wall. Ichiro walked over, smiling at him. "You know, it pisses me off thinking you get to treat her like that. I thought we were supposed to be siblings," he said, activating Impact Drive. You could see that his body was slightly enlarged as he still walked over to Izuku. Ichiro ped his fist back, hitting Izuku on the right side of the stomach. There was another pop from his ribs as Izuku had coughed up blood. Izuku gritted his teeth as blood dripped from his broken nose and his stomach throbbed in pain. Ichiro's punch had knocked the wind out of him, leaving him gasping as he struggled to regain his footing. But Ichiro wasn't finished. He grabbed Izuku by the collar, lifting him slightly off the ground. "You think you can just push Inori around and get away with it?" Ichiro growled, his voice low and menacing. Izuku coughed, spitting blood onto the pavement. His mind was racing, but his body was exhausted from the onslaught. Despite the pain, he managed to glare at Ichiro. "I told her to move," he rasped. Ichiro's expression twisted with anger, and he raised his fist again, hitting the wall behind him. "If you do that to our sister or anyone we see as friends, the beatdown will be worse the next time. Understand?" he asked. Izuku nodded at this, and he was dropped down. Izuku crumpled to the ground, his body screaming in protest as he struggled to breathe. His vision blurred with pain, but he clenched his fists tightly, digging his nails into his palms to keep himself grounded. His ribs ached, his face was throbbing, and his stomach churned from the repeated blows. Still, his resolve remained intact. Bakugo sneered down at him, the sparks from his palms flickering like small, menacing fireworks. "You're lucky we're letting you off easily this time, Deku," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "But don't think for a second this is over. You pull another stunt like that, and you'll wish you never stepped foot in this school." Inori stood off to the side, her arms crossed as she glared at Izuku. Her telekinesis had left her breathing slightly heavier than normal, but her anger was far from being exposed. "You're pathetic," she spat. "Trying to act tough when you're nothing but a quirkless loser. You should be grateful we even acknowledge you exist." Ichiro stepped back, flexing his fingers as if he were itching for another punch. His enlarged muscles from Impact Drive began to shrink as he deactivated his quirk, leaving him towering over Izuku with a look of disgust. "We're supposed to be family, you idiot. But you're nothing more than a stain on our name." Izuku didn't respond. He didn't trust himself to speak without his voice shaking, and he refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. He slowly pushed himself onto his hands and knees, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through his battered body. Pathetic, Bakugo muttered again, turning to walk out of the alley. Let's go. He's not worth any more of our time. Inori hesitated, her eyes narrowing as she looked down at Izuku one last time. Stay out of my way, Deku, she said coldly before following Bakugo. Ichiro lingered for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head and walked off without another word, leaving Izuku alone in the dimly lit alley. Izuku just lay staring at the sky that still had some light out but just enough that it would be sundown in a couple of hours. He coughed up a few more times, wiping the blood from his mouth. How are we supposed to be family when they treat like shit? He said to himself, turning over to get up. Izuku was crying slightly from the physical pain and emotional pain. Izuku struggled to his feet, his body trembling from the effort. Each movement was agonizing, but he forced himself to keep going. The alley felt suffocating, the shadows closing in around him as his mind raced with thoughts of despair and anger. His tears mixed with the blood on his face, dripping onto the pavement below. He clutched his side, the pain from his broken ribs making it difficult to breathe, let alone walk. His legs wobbled beneath him, threatening to give out at any moment. But Izuku pushed forward, one shaky step at a time, determined to make it home before the sun fully disappeared. Screw it, I need a hospital, he said as he started to walk to the nearest one he could find. He stopped for 1 second, grabbing his nose. He would be dead if he was charged more money than he needed to. With a yelp of pain he fixed his nose and it was back in place. Izuku winced as he adjusted his grip on his side, trying to keep the sharp pain at bay. He knew he couldn't let himself collapse in the middle of the street, not now. His determination to reach a hospital overrode his embarrassment. The occasional glance from passers-by felt like needles, but he refused to acknowledge them. His thoughts swirled with the events of the day. Did it come to this? He wondered bitterly. The so-called siblings who were supposed to have his back were his greatest tormentors. Bakugo had always been harsh, but Inori and Ichiro's betrayal cut deeper. Family wasn't supposed to hurt you like this, physically or emotionally. He gritted his teeth, his resolve hardening with each agonizing step. I can't stay like this forever, he muttered. I won't. The faint glow of a neon sign caught his eye, a small urgent care clinic. It wasn't a full hospital, but it would do. Izuku hesitated before entering, his hand trembling as he pushed open the door. The cool, sterile air of the clinic was a stark contrast to the suffocating warmth outside. A receptionist looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of him. Oh my, sir, are you okay? Izuku forced a weak smile, though the movement sent a fresh jolt of pain through his face. I need some help, he said, his voice hoarse. The receptionist hurried to her feet, calling for a nurse. Within moments, Izuku was led into a small examination room. The nurse's questions came rapid fire, but Izuku struggled to answer, his mind clouded by pain and exhaustion. Did someone do this to you? The nurse asked gently, her eyes scanning his injuries with a mixture of concern and suspicion. Izuku hesitated. His first instinct was to deny it, to protect the people who had done this, even if they didn't deserve it. It was just me getting jumped, he mumbled, avoiding her gaze. The nurse didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. We'll need to get you cleaned up and take some x-rays to assess the damage, she said. Izuku nodded, too tired to argue. As the nurse worked, cleaning his wounds and setting up for the scans, his thoughts drifted back to his training. If I were stronger, he said to himself. When they were finished, the doctor returned with the results. You've got 2 fractured ribs, a partially dislocated nose, which you already reset, and some severe bruising across your torso and face. You'll need to avoid heavy physical activity for at least 6 weeks to allow the ribs to heal properly. Izuku's heart sank. 6 weeks? That was practically an eternity in his world. He couldn't afford to stop training, not when he was already so far behind. But there is another option, and you are lucky that there is. There is a lady here that speeds up the recovery of your injuries to where you are good as new, she said, making his eyes go wide. Recovery girl is here? He asked excitedly but yelping in pain from his ribs. Ah, I see you know your stuff, but yes, she is here. She is on the 3rd floor and I can have her come down to see if she can do it for you. Izuku's heart raced, a flicker of hope piercing through the pain and exhaustion. Recovery girl is here? He could hardly believe his luck. If anyone could heal him quickly, it was her. Yes, please, he said, his voice breaking with relief. Despite the sharp pang in his ribs, he sat up straighter, ignoring the nurse's worried glance. If she has the time. The nurse smiled softly, recognizing the spark of determination in his eyes. I'll call her down, she said, leaving the room. Izuku slumped back against the examination table, his head spinning with possibilities. He could get back to training sooner, strengthen himself, and finally prove that he wasn't as weak as everyone thought. But beneath the optimism, doubt lingered. Would this really be enough to close the gap between him and his tormentors? A few minutes later, the door opened and Recovery Girl entered. Her petite frame and kind smile radiated a sense of comfort, though her sharp eyes quickly assessed his injuries with a practiced gaze. Goodness, young man, you've been through quite the ordeal, she said, shaking her head. You're lucky you didn't puncture a lung with those ribs. Now, tell me what happened. Izuku's voice trembled as he spoke, each word strained from the pain in his chest. I got jumped. That's all. Recovery Girl narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. It seems like there's more to the story, but I won't press you if you're not ready to share. Let's focus on getting you healed up first. She stepped closer, pulling out her signature syringe-like healing device. This will use a good amount of your stamina, so you'll need to rest afterward. But you'll be good as new in no time. Izuku nodded eagerly, though his body was still tense from the aches and bruises. Thank you. I really appreciate this. Recovery Girl smiled kindly, then leaned in to administer her quirk. As her healing energy surged through his body, Izuku winced, feeling a strange warmth spread through his injuries. The pain began to dull, replaced by an odd but welcome fatigue. Within moments, his ribs felt as though they'd never been fractured, and the soreness in his muscles had vanished. There, Recovery Girl said, stepping back and wiping her hands on a handkerchief. You're healed, but you'll still feel drained for a while. Go home, eat something nutritious, and get plenty of rest. Do you have someone to help you? Izuku hesitated, the question hitting a sore spot. No, he admitted quietly, looking down. I can manage on my own. Her expression softened, but she didn't push. All right, young man. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. You've been given another chance to keep going, so don't squander it. I won't, Izuku said firmly, his green eyes shining with determination. Say, young man, you look familiar, she said, looking at him closely. Have I seen you from somewhere? She asked. I think you have me confused with someone else, said Izuku, wondering who she thought he was. Recovery Girl tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp as she studied him, but she didn't press further. Maybe. It's not uncommon for me to see young faces around here. You're certainly a determined one. Keep that fire, it'll take you far. Izuku nodded silently, grateful for her words, though a nagging feeling settled in the back of his mind. He'd felt that same sense of familiarity in her voice, like she had known him long before that moment. But, as he thought about it more, he realized that it didn't matter now. All that mattered was healing, training, and proving to himself that he could become something more. Recovery Girl gave him one final smile before she turned to leave the room. Now, get some rest, young man. Don't push yourself too hard. Remember what I said, take care of yourself. Izuku smiled weakly, the words sticking in his head as he left the clinic, feeling lighter than he had in days. Even though the events with his family had left scars on his heart, the physical pain was now a distant memory, thanks to her healing. Izuku started to walk home knowing he would be late for supper, but he didn't care too much. He decided to see one night if they cared if he was home or not when they had dinner, and not surprised, they didn't say a thing. It hurt him more than they realized, but if they didn't care enough to have him at dinner, then it wasn't worth it. As he got home, the lights were off, meaning the family was somewhere else right now. He walked into his room where he had gotten 2 notifications on a screen that only he could see in front of him. Achievement complete. Apply for a gym membership, get a job, and commit to a consistent workout routine for 3 months. Reward: 1 quirk creation available. This made Izuku smile knowing he could give himself another quirk. The question is what though? He went to his room and entered. His mind space excited to create a new quirk. When he entered, Chase was already waiting for him ready to create a quirk. "Here is your tea, sir," he said, handing it to him. "Thank you, Chase. Now let us get ready to design my quirk," he said happily. "Right away, sir," he said, hitting a few buttons on the panel changing his screen. "Here it is, sir. Right now, you have a total of 46 quirks stored in the library. Have you thought about what type of quirk you would like to make?" he asked. "Well, that is the thing. I currently have Brain Boost, which gives me an additional 40 IQ constantly, and I don't know where to go from here. What type of quirk would be good to make?" he asked for his opinion. Chase put a hand to his chin. "Well, there are defensive quirks, elemental-based quirks, IQ quirks like you have made, and many more. I am not too sure," he said honestly. "All right, let me look through the library for a second," he said, waving his hand to generate the library before him. Chase had taught him that, and he was glad he could use it now. He started to look through his collection of stored quirks and started to list some of them. He looked at one for all and didn't even take a second glance. "Hell no," he said, walking past it. "Let me see here. Explosion wouldn't be good. Jolt is a maybe. I still would like to see what I can do with that," he said to himself. That was when his eyes went wide. The book he picked up said the words "heal" on top of it. Izuku smiled and went back to the panel to get to work. "Chase, I just realized that I possess Recovery Girl's quirk heal. This is a big game changer," he said. Chase raised an eyebrow, his gaze shifting to the quirk Izuku had just selected. "Heal," he repeated thoughtfully. "You're correct, sir. That's indeed a game changer. But why did you grab it?" "Well, if I am being honest, I do not want to go to the hospital constantly from being beat up, so I think it would be a good idea to have a quirk that can heal me and maybe others," he said quietly. "Excellent idea, sir. How would you like to set the parameters of your new quirk?" he asked as he put the quirk to the screen for him to choose. "Is there a way to have the quirk heal myself slowly over time but also heal others?" he asked. "Yes, sir, there is. You also have a quirk in storage that you have read in depth yet," as he snaps his fingers with the book teleporting in his hand, he said, showing him. The book was labeled Cellular STMLTN. In essence, the quirk talked about how it could boost the cells of the body to increase the healing process in a positive way and not negatively affect the body. "That's interesting," Izuku murmured, glancing between the heal quirk and the new book. Cellular STMLTN could speed up the healing process. If it enhances the cells of the body to recover faster without causing harm, I think it could work perfectly with heal. Chase nodded in agreement. "Exactly, sir. The combination of heal and cellular STMLTN could allow for a rapid healing process, not only for you but also for others. You could heal more efficiently and with greater range, and the energy cost might be reduced, as the body will recover on its own more swiftly." "That would be amazing. Though I would rather have myself place a hand on them to heal them and not kiss them," he said, blushing slightly. "Let me make the adjustments and see where it is." Izuku started to make the adjustments, his fingers moving quickly over the virtual interface. "All right, I want to be able to place my hand on someone, heal them, and use cellular STMLTN to speed up the process. But I also need the ability to heal myself without the need to touch myself. I want it to be faster than normal regeneration, but also so that I do not get tired myself. Wait, I also want people to not get tired of when I heal them," he said, looking at Chase. Chase nodded thoughtfully as he processed Izuku's request. "Understood, sir. So, you want to heal others by placing your hand on them, using cellular STMLTN to enhance the healing processing, and being able to heal yourself passively without tiring yourself or others out. That's quite an intricate setup, but it's possible. We can add a passive healing mode that activates when you are injured, healing you gradually without consuming too much energy." Izuku's fingers hovered over the screen, his eyes scanning the parameters. "Yeah, I like that." Izuku and Chase finished the parameters of the quirk building process and took a step back to admire their work. "All right, what we have is we combined both aspects of the quirks, and it is quite the powerful quirk," said Chase, analyzing it. So, you will be able to regenerate much faster than by normal standards, but we won't know until it is in effect. You will also be able to heal others without draining their stamina like Recovery Girl does, but it is much slower and weaker because you are also healing yourself. Just realize that you do not need to heal yourself manually and that it will be a part of you naturally, Chase said, sipping some tea. All that is left for you to do now is name the quirk. Izuku smiled and thought, I was thinking Cell Surge. Excellent, he said, hitting a few more buttons before a swirling vortex of light appeared just as before. Just as before, sir. Reach out to claim your new quirk, Cell Surge, said Chase, smiling proudly. Izuku reached out eagerly, his heart pounding as the swirling vortex of light swirled before him. The colors seemed to dance around his fingers, vibrating with an energy that felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. He extended his hand, focusing his thoughts on the name he'd just chosen, Cell Surge. The moment his fingers touched the light, he felt a strange, electric pulse run through his body. It was both exhilarating and slightly overwhelming, like his very cells were waking up, stretching and awakening as though they'd been dormant for too long. The light around him seemed to hum with power, before finally dissipating into nothingness, leaving him standing there, still, as if nothing had changed. Did it work? Izuku asked, turning to Chase, his voice filled with curiosity. He didn't feel any different, but there was a subtle shift in the air around him, as though something new was now embedded within him. Chase, who had been observing the entire process, smiled softly. It appears so, sir. You've successfully integrated the Cell Surge quirk into your system. You should be able to heal yourself and others now, and it should be far more efficient than before. It also says that your body will heal 3 times faster than the average body. That is awesome. Thanks again for everything, Chase, he said, bowing. It is my pleasure, sir, he said, bowing in return. A new goal appeared in front of Izuku's eyes after they were done bowing to each other. New requirement: collect and store 100 quirks in the quirk library. 46-100. Reward: 1 quirk creation available. Izuku nodded. Simple enough, he said to himself. He smiled at the fact that he was the first to have more than 1 quirk, to his knowledge anyway. Chapter 4. Strings of Fate. 2 weeks later. Izuku sighed as he lay in his bed. It was a Saturday, and it was his day off from Diamond near everything. No homework, no training because it was his rest, no nothing. He sat up and decided he needed to do something. He got dressed and headed downstairs to head out. He looked to see Inori and Ichiro on the couch watching the latest hero rankings on TV as he went to the door. Inori looked over to Izuku and smirked. Well, if it isn't my useless brother, Deku, she said, looking over at him. Izuku just ignored her. She never would have said this if their parents weren't around, but he didn't care right now. Oi, Deku, I was talking to you, she said, sitting up to walk over to him. Yeah, I know, he said as he was putting on his right shoe. Inori narrowed her eyes, her tone growing more condescending. Where do you think you're going, huh? It's not like you got any friends. Yeah, I know I don't. You two made sure of that, he said, pointing at Ichiro and Inori. Inori's expression hardened at his words, and Ichiro, who had been lazily lounging on the couch, sat up at the mention of his name. What did you just say? Ichiro's voice was calm but laced with a dangerous edge. Izuku turned slowly to face his older brother, his gaze steady despite the growing tension. You heard me. You two made sure that your younger brother was made known to the world that he was quirkless, useless, and a waste of space. You remind everyone and myself of that every day. Now, if you will excuse me, I would like to get some fresh air, he said as he finished putting his shoes on, stepping out of the apartment. Ichiro's voice called out sharply just as Izuku reached the door. Don't walk away when I'm talking to you, Deku. Izuku froze for a moment, his hand lingering on the doorknob. He had always hated that nickname, especially coming from his siblings. It wasn't just the word, it was the weight of their contempt behind it. Slowly, he turned his head to glance back at Ichiro, his expression calm but firm. I'm not walking away, Izuku replied. I'm choosing not to waste my time arguing with the two people who always think they are always right, he said, shutting the apartment door. Izuku walked away from their apartment and sighed. God, that gets old. he said as he was trying to figure out something to do. Izuku wandered down the familiar streets, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. It felt liberating to be away from the suffocating atmosphere of his apartment, even if it meant dealing with the uncertainty of what to do next. His hands were shoved deep into his jacket pockets, and he kept his head low, avoiding the gazes of passers-by. He wasn't in the mood for unnecessary interactions, but the world around him still buzzed with life. You know, they sure are lucky that I have never thought about ending my life. They would be liable for it, but then again, quirkless people are treated like garbage anyway, he thought sadly. It still bothered him that no one believed that he wasn't quirkless anymore, but he decided to leave it at that and try to find something to do. As he walked down the street, he saw something out of the corner of his eye, and it was an instrument store. Izuku's steps slowed as he turned his attention to the instrument store. The warm glow of its interior spilled out through the large glass windows, and the sight of neatly arranged instruments caught his eye. Guitars hung on the walls, keyboards lined the back, and various percussion instruments were set up on display stands. Something was inviting about the place, a sense of calm creativity that drew him in. He pushed open the door, a soft chime signaling his entrance. The inside of the store smelled faintly of polished wood and leather, a combination that instantly put him at ease. A middle-aged man stood behind the counter, cleaning a violin with meticulous care. He glanced up at Izuku with a friendly smile. "Welcome. Let me know if you need any help," the man said before returning to his work. Izuku nodded at him and smiled as he looked at the selection. He packed a buttload of money today in case he wanted to have a lot of fun. Not like that, you perverts. As he looked at the guitars, he wasn't too sure what to get. Whether it was an acoustic or an electric one. He was interrupted from his thoughts as someone tapped him on the shoulder. "Trying to figure out what kind of guitar you want?" asked a feminine voice from his side. "Yeah. I've never played or anything, so I don't know where to start," he said, turning to the girl. Izuku turned to see a girl with short, black hair and a pair of headphone jacks dangling from her earlobes. Her sharp, black eyes appraised him with a mix of curiosity and confidence. She wore a leather jacket over a band t-shirt, paired with ripped jeans and boots, exuding an air of cool nonchalance. A pair of drumsticks were tucked into her jacket pocket, hinting at her musical background. The girl gave him a small smirk. "Well, if you're starting fresh, you've come to the right place. I'm Kyokajiro. I know a thing or two about guitars, and music in general." Izuku offered a shy smile, a bit taken aback by her easy demeanor. "I'm Izuku Yagi. I've been thinking about picking up music to, try something new. Do you work here?" "Oh no, I don't. I saw you were struggling and decided to help," she said, shrugging. Jiro tilted her head, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "You seem like someone who could use a good escape," she said, her tone softer. "Music has a way of drowning out the noise in your head. Trust me, it's worth it." Izuku nodded, appreciating her understanding without needing to delve into the details of his situation. "So, where should I start? Acoustic or electric?" Jiro tapped her chin, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Well, that depends. Acoustic is great for starting out, easy to pick up, no extra gear. Plus, it's versatile and portable. But if you're into the idea of rocking out and making some serious noise, electric's the way to go." Izuku scratched the back of his head. "I don't know. I think I'd like something I can play at home without disturbing anyone." "Acoustic it is," Jiro said, her smirk returning. "Follow me." She led him to a display of acoustic guitars, her movements confident and purposeful. She stopped in front of a row of instruments, running her fingers lightly over the polished wood. "This one's a classic starter guitar. Solid build, good sound, and it won't break the bank." Izuku reached out tentatively, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of the guitar. He picked it up, marveling at its lightweight and the warmth of the wood against his palms. "Nice," he said, his voice tinged with wonder. Jiro chuckled. "Nice is a good start. Let me show you how to hold it." She stepped closer, her hands moving with precision as she adjusted his grip on the guitar. "Relax your shoulders. Let it rest against your body like this. See? Comfortable, right?" Izuku nodded, his grip steadying under her guidance. Feels natural. Good, she said, stepping back and crossing her arms. Now, let's try a basic chord. Place your fingers here and here. Press down firmly, but not too hard. You don't want to strain yourself. Izuku followed her instructions, his brow furrowed in concentration. He strummed the strings, producing a sound that was more twang than melody. He winced, but Jiro smirked. Hey, it's a start, she said. No one's a pro on their first try. Keep at it. Izuku smiled sheepishly, his cheeks tinged pink at his less-than-perfect first attempt. Thanks, Jiro. I think I'll buy this, he said, picking it up and taking it to the counter. Good choice, Jiro said, watching as Izuku carefully carried the guitar to the counter. The shopkeeper, still polishing the violin, looked up and set his work aside to help. Ah, that's a fine instrument, the shopkeeper said with a warm smile. Great for beginners, but it'll grow with you as you improve. He rang up the purchase, adding a small starter kit with extra strings and a beginner's guidebook. Do you need a case for it? Yes, please, Izuku replied, fumbling slightly with his wallet. He placed the money on the counter, grateful he'd brought enough to cover everything. As the shopkeeper packed the guitar, Izuku glanced back at Jiro, who had casually perched on a nearby stool, twirling one of her drumsticks. Do you come here often? He asked, genuinely curious. Every now and then, Jiro said, shrugging. I like to check out new instruments, maybe pick up supplies. Plus, it's a nice place to unwind. Izuku nodded, understanding the sentiment. There was something calming about the store's atmosphere, with its faint scent of wood and the quiet hum of conversation. It felt like a safe space, a small bubble of peace in an otherwise chaotic world. The shopkeeper handed him the guitar, now snug in a protective case. Take good care of it, he said. And don't hesitate to come back if you need anything. Thank you, Izuku said, bowing politely before turning to Jiro. Thanks for your help too. I probably would have left empty-handed if you hadn't stepped in. Jiro smirked, standing up and slinging her drumsticks back into her jacket pocket. No problem. It's fun seeing someone get into music for the first time. Just promise me you'll practice, yeah? Don't let that guitar gather dust. I won't, he said, bowing. Thank you again, he said, leaving, but was stopped once more by her putting a hand on his shoulder. Wait, give me your number, she said, pulling out her phone. Izuku blushed immediately after that. Sure. Izuku stammered, fumbling for his phone. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked it, the sudden request catching him completely off guard. He wasn't used to people being so direct with him, especially someone as effortlessly cool as Jiro. Jiro smirked, clearly amused by his flustered reaction. Relax, it's not a big deal, she said, holding out her phone. Here, put your number in. Izuku nodded quickly, typing his number into her phone with careful precision. When he handed it back, Jiro glanced at the screen to confirm it was saved and gave a small nod of approval. Alright, Yagi. I'll shoot you a text later. Don't ignore it, or I'll know you're slacking off. He chuckled nervously, his cheeks still pink. I won't. Promise. When he got home, he placed the guitar case on his bed and carefully opened it. The polished wood gleamed under the soft light of his room, and Izuku ran his fingers along the body, marveling at its craftsmanship. He took out the beginner's guidebook the shopkeeper had included and flipped through the pages, eager to get started. He spent the next few hours experimenting with the chords Jiro had shown him, strumming clumsily but with determination. His fingers fumbled over the strings, producing awkward sounds more often than not, but he didn't let it discourage him. Each twang and misstep felt like a small step forward, a piece of the learning process. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the room darkened, his phone buzzed on his desk. He picked it up to find a message from an unknown number. Hey, it's Jiro. Practicing already, right? Don't tell me you gave up after one day. Izuku grinned and quickly typed a reply. Of course. I've been practicing for hours. It's harder than I thought, though. Her response came almost immediately. But it's supposed to be hard. But you'll get there. Keep practicing and you'll be good in no time. Say, what school do you attend? Izuku hesitated for a moment before replying. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer Jiro's question, but it still felt strange to talk about his personal life with someone he'd only just met. Still, she'd been kind and encouraging, so he figured there was no harm in telling her. Aldra Junior High. Izuku typed back, then hesitated before hitting send. After a moment, he pressed the button, feeling a small flutter of nervousness as he did so. It wasn't like Aldra had the best reputation, and he wasn't sure how Jiro might react. Her reply came quickly. Aldra. Not exactly the most famous school, but I guess it gets the job done. Do you plan on becoming a hero, or are you just doing music as a hobby? I would love more than anything to be a hero, and I am working on becoming one by going to UA High. I am learning music to have as a hobby so that I am not always training, reading, or overexerting myself, he texted her. Yeah? That's pretty awesome. I get the whole balance thing. Heroes can't save the world if they burn out, right? Plus, music's a great way to relax and focus on something other than the stress of everything. The two continued to text each other, making Izuku smile more and more. This was a friend that he could consider an actual friend. Not unlike Bakugo or his siblings. It might have been his first year at Aldra Junior High, but he couldn't wait to get out of there. He hoped that this new friendship would last. 1 month later. Harder, Izuku, said Arai as he laid out another palm strike at Izuku's chest. Izuku dodged the attack by going for a leg sweep, but his sensei had dodged that one as well. Izuku always remarked that Arai having a triple-jointed quirk was always a pain because he could just dodge about 95% of his attacks. It was likely why Arai used to be number 73 in hero rankings. Izuku quickly rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding a spinning back kick that would have knocked him flat on his back. His heart raced, and sweat trickled down his forehead as he rose to his feet, trying to shake off the growing fatigue. Arai was relentless. His quirk, which allowed him to stretch and twist his limbs in unnatural ways, made him nearly impossible to predict. Every time Izuku thought he had the upper hand, Arai's strange, triple-jointed limbs gave him the flexibility to escape. Come on, Yagi. You've been training for months now. You should be able to land a clean hit by now. Arai's voice was stern but not unkind, a sharp contrast to the playful teasing he sometimes gave during their sparring sessions. Izuku breathed, wiping the sweat from his brow. I know. It's just hard to keep up with your quirk. He adjusted his stance, trying to anticipate Arai's next move, his mind running through various techniques he'd learned over the past month. Arai's eyes gleamed with that familiar, calculated amusement as he prepared another attack. Your biggest weakness, Yagi, is that you're too predictable. You're relying too much on what you already know. You need to start thinking outside the box if you want to outmaneuver me. Izuku bit his lip. He knew Arai was right. His usual method of brute force wasn't going to work here, especially when facing someone with such an unpredictable quirk. He needed to adapt, to improvise. Just as Arai launched himself forward, Izuku dropped to a crouch and let his opponent pass over him, narrowly avoiding the palm strike aimed at his head. With a burst of speed, Izuku reached out, grabbing Arai's ankle as he tried to spring back. Using Arai's momentum against him, Izuku twisted his body and sent his sensei tumbling to the floor. Arai stared up at him, clearly surprised. Well, Yagi, looks like you're starting to get it. Izuku, though exhausted, couldn't help but smile. It feels different, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. Arai pushed himself up with a grunt and offered a hand to Izuku. That's what I like to see. You're finally thinking on your feet. Keep this up, and you'll be ready for UA in no time. Izuku had told him that he would like to go to UA a couple of years down the road, and he was one of the few that believed in him. Aside from Jiro, of course, who supported him in his endeavors. Thanks, Arai-sensei, Izuku said, bowing slightly. I'll keep working at it. Arai smirked, crossing his arms. Good. You're making progress, Yagi, but don't let it get to your head. You've still got a long way to go before you're ready for UA. Keep training, keep pushing yourself. Oh, and one more thing. Izuku blinked, looking up at him. Yes. Arai leaned closer, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Don't forget to ice those bruises. I went easy on you today, but tomorrow? Well, let's just say you might need to start stretching before you even walk through that door. Izuku laughed nervously. Right, I'll make sure to do that. As he left the dojo, Izuku felt a surge of pride and determination. It wasn't just the physical progress he was making, it was the mental fortitude he was building. He'd started this journey unsure of himself, but every sparring session, every lesson from Arai, was helping him believe in his dream of becoming a hero. He felt his phone vibrating and he looked down to see who it was, and it was Jiro. He was honestly happy that him and her had become pretty good friends. He was a lot better at the guitar than he was when he first started playing, and it was because of Jiro giving him advice and pointers. He picked up his cell phone as he walked out of the gym, answering her. "Hello," he said. "Hey, Yagi, I was wondering if you were busy?" she asked curiously. "Not particularly at the moment. I just got done with the gym," he said as she hummed thoughtfully. "Would it be okay if you were to have dinner with my family and me?" "It's up to you if you want," she said, not wanting to force him. Izuku hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the invitation. Dinner with Jiro's family? It felt like a big step, considering they'd only known each other for about a month. But then again, Jiro had been nothing but supportive and kind to him, and the idea of spending more time with her, especially in a setting outside of training or texting, sounded nice. "I'd love to," Izuku said, a small smile forming on his lips. "Are you sure your family won't mind?" Jiro chuckled on the other end of the line. "Trust me, my parents are cool. My mom's been curious about the new friend I keep mentioning, so you'll probably score some points just by showing up." "Okay, where should I meet you?" Izuku asked, shifting his gym bag to his other shoulder. "I'll text you the address. It's not too far from where you are. Come by around 7. "Sounds good. I'll see you then," Izuku replied. "Great. Oh, and Yagi?" "Yeah. Relax." "Well, I'm just an awkward guy, you know," he said, rubbing the back of his head. "Yeah, I know that, but it's fine." Izuku laughed nervously. "Thanks for the warning. See you later." Hanging up the call, Izuku felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Meeting someone's family was a big deal, even if it was just as friends. He quickened his pace, heading home to shower and find something presentable to wear. He cleaned up and threw on a gray long sleeve with black breathes along with his red shoes, and he was eventually on his way. Izuku arrived at the address Jiro had sent him, pausing outside the modest yet welcoming home. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves swirling in his stomach. "Relax," Jiro had told him. Easier said than done. He adjusted the strap of his gym bag, then checked his phone to confirm the time, 6:55 p.m. Right on time. The front door opened just as he reached it, and Jiro stepped out, her usual cool demeanor lightened by a warm smile. She wore a casual hoodie and jeans, her headphones draped around her neck. "Hey, Yagi." "Perfect timing." "Hey," he replied, smiling back. "Thanks for inviting me." "No problem. Come on in," Jiro said, stepping aside to let him in. "Mom, Dad." "He's here," Jiro called out, guiding Izuku into the living room. Izuku was met by the sight of her mother first, and it was pretty obvious from there where she got her looks from. It looks like she also got her quirk from her, as she had the same earphone jacks that she had. Her mother greeted him with a warm smile that radiated genuine kindness. "You must be Yagi. Jiro's told us so much about you," she said, extending her hand. Izuku shook it, his nerves slightly easing at her welcoming demeanor. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Jiro. Thank you for having me over." "Please, call me Mika," she insisted. "And this is my husband." Mr. Jiro entered from the kitchen, a tall, slightly intimidating man with a serious expression. However, as he approached, his face softened into a friendly smile. "Welcome, Yagi. I'm Kyotoku. Hope you're hungry. I made plenty of food." Izuku nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Thank you for having me." "Dude, you can chill, my dad doesn't bite," she said, trying to calm him down. Izuku could have sworn that he saw her dad give him a glare which made him look down at the ground. Jiro noticed Izuku's unease and quickly stepped in, giving her dad a pointed look. "Seriously, Dad, stop trying to scare my friends. It's not funny." Kyotoku held up his hands in mock surrender, a sly grin spreading across his face. All right. I'm just messing with the kid." Izuku managed a small laugh, though his heart was still racing. "It's okay. I'm just not used to meeting new people like this." Mika smiled warmly. "You're doing just fine. Come on, let's sit down." Dinner's ready. The dining table was already set, with bowls of steaming rice, grilled fish, miso soup, and an assortment of side dishes that made Izuku's stomach rumble. He took a seat across from Jiro, her father sitting at the head of the table and her mother to his right. So, Yagi, Mika began as she poured tea into their cups, Jiro tells us you're planning on going to UA? Izuku blinked at the question, momentarily caught off guard. Oh, yes ma'am. I plan on going there one day and I am training hard to make sure that happens. Well, isn't that a surprise? Our little Jiro said she has been planning to go there for some time too. 4 years in fact, said Kyoto taking a drink of his tea. Izuku glanced at Jiro, who shrugged casually but couldn't hide the faint blush creeping up her cheeks. Yeah, well, I've been working on it, she said, picking at her rice. It's not like I talk about it all the time. Mika smiled knowingly. She's been dedicated to music and training to be a hero since she was little. We always knew she'd aim high. But, the question is, who is your favorite hero? Asked Kyoto. Izuku thought about it. He would have said All Might, but after recent events, it had changed. Truth be told, I don't have a favorite hero. I like Endeavor, Edge Shot, Mirko, Death Arms, and a bunch of other ones, said Izuku, hoping it was a good answer. Kyoto raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Not All Might, huh? Most kids your age are obsessed with him. No, not him too much. I'm not saying he isn't great, but there are so many other heroes, he said, a little embarrassed. Kyoto nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. Fair enough. Sorry for not asking you this earlier, but tell us a little about yourself, he said, narrowing his eyes at him. Izuku couldn't seem to look him in the eyes and looked at his dinner instead. Well, my name is Izuku Yagi. I am 12 years old and go to Aldra Junior High. I love to learn a lot of different things and I plan on becoming a hero one day, hopefully the greatest, he said, smiling slightly at that last part. Jiro's father still held his expression at him, making him feel less confident. Dad, can you not stare him down like he's on trial? Jiro said with an exasperated tone, shooting her father a pointed look. Seriously, he's not here to defend his life choices to you. Kyoto blinked, then chuckled, leaning back in his chair and raising his hands in mock surrender. Alright, I'll ease up. Sorry kid. Habit of mine. I like to know the kind of people my daughter spends her time with. Izuku managed a small smile, though his heart was still racing. It's okay, Mr. Jiro. I understand. I just want to make a good impression. It's alright, Yagi. My dad normally isn't this bad, said Jiro, sending a glare of her own his way. Kyoto raised his hands in defense, looking more amused than apologetic. Alright, no more interrogations. I'll behave, I promise. He leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. I just want to make sure anyone my daughter hangs around is someone I can trust. Izuku felt the tension in the room ease a little as the conversation shifted. Mika smiled warmly at him, offering some comforting words to balance out her husband's rough edges. Don't mind him, Yagi. He just worries like all fathers do. She patted Kyoto's arm playfully. It's nice that you're so focused on your future. Hero or not, it's important to aim high. Izuku nodded, feeling more at ease with the light-hearted atmosphere. Thanks, Mrs. Jiro. His eyes shifted over to Jiro, who had returned to picking at her rice. I, also really admire the way you balance everything, Jiro. Music, hero training, school. It's inspiring. Jiro glanced at him, her cheeks a little pinker than before. It's hard, but it is doable. Izuku smiled softly, sensing the faint warmth in Jiro's voice. I can imagine. Balancing all those things must be tough. But you seem to handle it really well. He glanced at her, noticing how she seemed to shrink into herself slightly, as if trying to avoid the attention but still unable to hide the pride in her eyes. It's not always easy, Jiro admitted, shifting her attention to her plate. There are days when everything feels like it's falling apart, but I don't give up. I can't afford to. Her determination resonated with Izuku. He admired it. It reminded him of his own struggles, his own daily challenges in training, school, and trying to prove himself as a hero. I get that, he said softly, his gaze settling back on the food in front of him. But I think it's worth it, right? Even when it feels hard. Mika chuckled, her voice warm and understanding. Exactly. It's those tough times that help you grow, Yagi. You'll face obstacles along the way, but it's how you handle them that counts. Izuku nodded, feeling encouraged by her words. He could see why Jiro had inherited that tenacity from her mother. The conversation continued, flowing more easily now that the atmosphere had settled. They shared stories about their days, small details about what life was like for them, from the latest news in the hero world to funny anecdotes from Jiro's childhood. Izuku found himself laughing along, the tension in his chest slowly loosening as he felt more comfortable in their company. After dinner, the two parents told the kids to go into the living room to go and relax while they handled the dishes. While they were chilling out and watching television, Jiro decided to ask a question that was on her mind. Say, Yagi, you haven't talked much about your family, is there a reason for that? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, she said, trying not to force him. Izuku looked at her and sat up. No, I should tell you anyway, he said, turning to face her. Truth be told, my relationship with my parents is strained, he said, thinking about how his father Toshinori told him to give up his dream to be a hero with his mother silently supporting it. Jiro blinked in surprise, not expecting Izuku to open up so quickly. She noticed the way his shoulders tensed slightly, the way his hands gripped his knees as if grounding himself. Strained? What do you mean? She asked softly, her tone careful. Izuku hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. Well, my dad, he's always been strict about what he thinks I should do with my life. And when I told him I wanted to be a hero, he didn't take it well. He said I wasn't strong enough, that it was too dangerous. His voice faltered for a moment, but he pressed on. He wanted me to focus on something else, something he thought was more realistic. And my mom, she didn't exactly argue with him. She just went along with it. Jiro frowned, leaning forward slightly. That's rough. So they don't support you at all? Izuku shook his head. Not really. All this studying, training, martial arts, and all that stuff. I have been doing this without their knowledge. Then there is the problem with my siblings. I am the youngest of triplets, and my older brother and sister are given a lot more attention than me when it comes to that type of stuff. They were given powerful quirks and have the full support of my parents. Izuku paused for a moment, his expression pained but resolute as he continued. My brother, Ichiro, has a quirk that can amplify his body tremendously to give him strength, speed, agility, and more, while my sister, Inori, has an incredible telekinesis quirk, allowing her to lift things as heavy as fridges and is even trying to lift cars. Jiro listened intently, her gaze soft but focused. That sounds horrible. Yeah, it is, but I am going to prove that I can be a hero. Just as much as they can, he said, clenching his fist. Jiro studied Izuku carefully, noting the fire in his eyes despite the pain etched on his face. She admired his determination. It was a trait she'd noticed in him since they first met, and now she understood where it came from. I believe you can, Yagi, she said softly, her voice filled with sincerity. You've already proven so much just by pushing forward, even without their support. Her words hit him harder than he expected, and for a moment, Izuku didn't know how to respond. He felt a lump in his throat, but it wasn't the kind of heaviness he usually carried. It was something lighter, something comforting. Thanks, Jiro. I don't hear that kind of thing very often. Jiro smirked, trying to lighten the mood. Well, maybe you should hang out with better people more often. Izuku chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing. Maybe I should. The rest of the evening went on just fine, and it was soon time to leave. I guess I should be heading back soon, he said, a tinge of regret in his voice. It had been a long time since he'd felt so at ease, and leaving felt like stepping out of a bubble of warmth and safety. Jiro shrugged, though there was a flicker of something unspoken in her expression. Yeah, I guess you should. Don't want your parents to worry, or notice you're gone, right? Izuku chuckled softly, though there was a hint of sadness behind it. Yeah, something like that. Jiro's parents appeared at the doorway, Mika drying her hands on a dish towel and Kyotoku leaning casually against the frame. Mika smiled warmly. Heading out, Yagi? You're welcome to stay longer if you want. Thank you, Mrs. Jiro, but I should get going, Izuku said, bowing politely. I really appreciate you having me over. Dinner was amazing, and it was nice being here. That is. Good kid, safe travels to you, said Jiro's dad, waving at him. Thank you. Thanks again for having me here, Jiro. I'll see you later, he said, waving and smiling back at her. Yep, bye, she said, waving back as he shut the door. Mika looked at her daughter and smiled. What a sweet boy. You were kidding when you said he was awkward. Jiro sighed, slumping into the couch after the door clicked shut behind Izuku. He's not that awkward, ma'am. He's just shy, that's all. She tried to sound nonchalant, but the warmth in her tone betrayed her. Mika chuckled, settling next to her daughter. Shy maybe, but there's something endearing about the way he speaks. He's genuine, which is refreshing. She gave Jiro a knowing glance. You don't bring friends home very often. What made you want to bring him over? Jiro shrugged, avoiding her mother's gaze. I dunno. He's different. Not in a bad way, just he works hard. And he doesn't seem like the type to give up even when things get tough. Her voice softened as she continued, it's kind of inspiring, I guess. Kyoto could join them, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. Inspiring, huh? Sounds like someone's impressed. He smirked, earning a sharp glare from his daughter. Dad, Jiro groaned, leaning her head back against the couch. Don't start. All right, he said, raising his hands in surrender. I'm just saying he seems like a good kid. A bit nervous, but good. You could do worse for a friend. Jiro rolled her eyes, but a small smile tugged at her lips. He is a good guy. A little too hard on himself, though. You heard him, his family doesn't support him, and he's out here training in secret just to prove himself. It's kind of unfair. Mika nodded thoughtfully. It is. But it also says a lot about his character. He's determined, and that's something to admire. Still, it's sad that he doesn't have the support he deserves. With Izuku, that dinner could have gone worse, he said to himself as he walked up to his apartment door. He was happy to have made an impression on her parents, making them know he was a nice kid. He opened the door to see that no one was in the living room or dining room area again. He decided to pull out a book to read to get a different environment for reading before he decided to go to bed. He plopped himself down on the couch and pulled out a book about the latest in gadgets and how they were made. Izuku flipped through the pages of the book, his fingers tracing over the diagrams of intricate gadget designs. The soft hum of the apartment's refrigerator was the only sound accompanying him in the quiet space. He found himself engrossed in an article about a new type of compact jet propulsion system, marveling at the ingenuity behind the design. He heard something from the door and he saw his dad walk in with a tired look on his face. Toshinori turned around and locked the door and was surprised to see his son. His other son. Son, what are you doing? He asked, setting down his briefcase. Izuku frowned slightly, not wanting to look at him. Reading, was all he said as he tried to indulge himself more in his book. Toshinori nodded at that. Reading is always good. Say, I noticed that you no longer have All Might posters and memorabilia in your room. Yeah, what about it? He said, getting annoyed. Truth was he took them down the moment he found out his dad was All Might. The man that treated him like shit and told him to give up on his dream was no hero. Well, you just seem to have stopped idolizing him, Toshinori said, wondering why his son took down the posters. Well, I guess we all have to grow up sometime. Besides, I needed the money, he said, closing his book in annoyance. Toshinori's brow furrowed as he processed his son's words. Grow up? Are you feeling okay? Never felt better, he said, walking upstairs to his room. Toshinori looked confused at his son. Izuku had always seen All Might, himself, as like a god. He shrugged, pushing that thought to the side. He needed to prepare for a long night of missions to try to stop crime. Chapter 5. Birthday Celebration. 1 month later, Izuku's birthday. Izuku sighed as he stretched out in legs in class. Something that he noticed was that with all of his reading and information that he learned from his memory recall from the Brain Boost quirk, the classes were starting to seem repetitive. He still listened, but he wasn't even paying attention half the time and was still getting A's on all his tests, quizzes, and homework. He felt something hit the back of his head and he wiped it away to see it was a mushed-up paper ball. He looked back to see it was Bakugo spitting it at him. He shook his head trying to get back to the lecture. It was his birthday, and he wasn't sure how he was going to celebrate it. Even if his parents still treated him badly and barely gave him attention, they still gave him a half-decent birthday. He was half tempted to spend it with Jiro and hang out with her instead. The other thing that made him happy was that Chase had sent a notification of a goal being birthday boy and it said that he would be allowed to create 2 more quirks. It made him smile at the possible abilities he could do with that. Plus his sensei gave him a break from the dojo for today to allow him to relax. Bakugo spit another ball on his head and Izuku dodged it, getting a surprised look from him. This made him madder and he decided to spit a few more. Izuku just accepted the hits to make him stop for a bit. "Alright, class, that is all for today. Make sure to study for tomorrow's test," said their teacher as most of them started to pack up. Izuku gathered his belongings, carefully slipping his notebooks into his bag. As he stood to leave, Bakugo bumped into him intentionally, nearly making him drop his things. "Watch where you're going, Deku," Bakugo sneered, his ever-present smirk twisting his features. "Yes, Bakugo," said somewhat mockingly at him. Bakugo stopped for a second and scoffed. That was another thing that had changed. He had stopped calling him Kaken as there was a name for his friend, not an a-hole who treated him like shit every day. Funny enough, it was starting to visibly bother Bakugo that he wasn't do it anymore. He picked up his things while walking down the halls and saw his siblings hanging out by the door. "Yo, Deku, how you are doing?" asked Inori a little too sweetly. Bakugo was standing near Ichiro, and they smirked at them. "I'm fine." "Why?" he asked confused. He knew he hadn't done anything yet, so why were they messing with him? "Nothing," she said, walking around and pulling his bag off his back. He didn't resist as that would cause more problems. She dumped out his bag to see what he had in there. Izuku sighed inwardly as his books and notes spilled onto the hallway floor, scattering in every direction. Students passing by glanced at the scene but didn't intervene. Most had learned to avoid getting involved when it came to Bakugo and Izuku's so-called friends. "Seriously, Inori?" Izuku muttered, bending down to gather his belongings. He kept his voice calm, though irritation simmered just beneath the surface. "What's this, huh?" Inori snatched up one of his notebooks, flipping through it with exaggerated curiosity. "Are you writing a diary or something? How pathetic." Ichiro snickered, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Bakugo watched the scene with a smug grin, clearly enjoying the humiliation. "They are books from the library," he said, trying to get it back, but Inori yanked it away from him. "Let's see what it is," she said, using her telekinesis to pick up the books to see. Inori's telekinetic grip hovered the books in midair, her smirk growing wider as she read the titles aloud. "Heroic Strategies for Rescue Missions," she said mockingly. "Advanced Quirk Analysis, Tactical Planning for Pro Heroes." "Geez, what a nerd. You think you're hero material, Deku?" "More than a lot of people, yes," he said bluntly. Inori sent him a glare on his way. "Are you still seriously trying to become a hero?" she asked. Izuku met her glare head-on, his green eyes steady and unwavering. "Yes, I am. And no amount of this," he gestured to his scattered books and notes, "is going to change that." Ichiro heard this from the wall he was leaning on. "Dude, we have been through this hundreds of times. Quirkless." Izuku didn't flinch, though the weight of Ichiro's words pressed heavily against him. "And I've told you just as many times," he said, his voice steady, "a quirk isn't what makes a hero. It's their heart, their determination, and their willingness to do what's right." Most of the people had left the hallway and there was no one around now, meaning Izuku had to get out of there, otherwise they would use their quirks on him. Izuku subtly glanced around the now empty hallway, his heart pounding. He knew what was coming. This wasn't the first time his siblings had cornered him when no one was around. He tightened his grip on his scattered belongings, his mind racing for an escape route. Inori floated the books higher, her telekinetic grip tightening. "You're so full of yourself, Deku. Acting like you're better than us just because you read a bunch of books." "I never said I was better," Izuku replied, standing his ground. "I just refuse to give up." "Refuse to give up, huh?" Ichiro said with a mocking laugh. He activated his quirk. Let's see how far that stubbornness gets you. Bakugo smirked, cracking his knuckles. You really don't learn, do you, Deku? Let's teach you a lesson you won't forget. Yeah, how about no? Why would guys waste your time on someone who you think is useless? He said, trying to deter them. Bakugo's smirk faltered for a moment, and Izuku's words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with defiance. Inori and Ichiro paused, as though considering the suggestion. The three of them powered down, and Inori sighed, putting the books down. Fair point. Glad to see that you are seeing yourself as useless now, said Inori, walking away from him with Ichiro and Bakugo following them. Bye, loser, she said before shutting the door. He sighed at this. He will never understand why the hell they get a sick kick out bullying him. Not to mention that if he fought back, then they would fight back harder. He needed to get an offensive quirk created soon so he could better defend himself. He walked outside and didn't seem to notice his purple-haired friend. Yo, Yagi, called out Jiro, leaning up against the wall. Izuku blinked, snapping out of his thoughts at the sound of Jiro's voice. He hadn't noticed her standing by the wall, her arms crossed as she waited for him. A small smile tugged at his lips, and he walked over to her, trying to shake off the frustration he still felt from the earlier encounter with his siblings. Hey, Jiro, he said, his voice a little more tired than he intended. Sorry, I was just lost in thought there. Wait, what are you doing here? Your school is like 45 minutes away from here, he said, wondering. Well, it is your birthday, and I thought I would come and see my friend. Unless you don't want me to, she said, raising an eyebrow. No. I'm really glad you came, Jiro. I just didn't expect it. I wasn't planning on doing anything for my birthday. Jiro's expression softened in response, and she stepped forward, gently nudging his shoulder with hers. Well, now you've got something to look forward to, right? I'm not going to let you spend your birthday sulking in a corner somewhere. Are you sure you want to come to my place for a party? I don't think it would end well, he said, scratching the back of his head. With what? Your siblings and parents? Who gives a rat but what they think? I sure as hell don't. Now let us get going, she said, pushing him along. Sorry, I get it. I'm not going to ruin my own birthday by sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Izuku gave her a small but genuine smile. But I'm warning you, things might be awkward. Jiro raised an eyebrow and grinned. Awkward? Oh, come on, I've dealt with way worse. I can handle your family. Izuku's laugh was weak but real, and he felt a small sense of relief. Jiro always knew how to lighten the mood. They made their way out of the school, the cool air of the late afternoon brushing against their skin. Izuku couldn't help but glance back toward the school, his thoughts drifting to his siblings. The encounter with them still stung, but Jiro's presence was a comforting reminder that he wasn't alone. As they made their way to his home, Jiro chatted about everything under the sun, her latest band practice, the upcoming school events, and her own frustrations with school life. It was nice to hear something that wasn't about his lack of a quirk or his family's constant indifference. For the first time that day, Izuku felt like he could breathe again. When they arrived at his house, Izuku hesitated for a moment. The familiar, oppressive atmosphere of the house loomed ahead. His parents' indifference, the teasing from his siblings, it was all waiting for him behind that door. But Jiro was by his side, and that gave him the courage to push the door open. Inside, the house was as quiet and empty as usual. His parents were nowhere to be seen, and his siblings were probably off doing their own thing, leaving him with the distinct impression that he was an afterthought, even on his own birthday. Come on, let's do this, Jiro said, her voice full of determination. She looked around the house, her expression a mix of curiosity and mild disdain. Wow, this place is like a ghost town. You live here, huh? Izuku chuckled nervously. Yeah, it's pretty quiet most of the time. So, what do you usually do for your birthday, anyway? She asked, glancing around. Oh well, I don't really do much, he said, flustered. He really was not used to this feeling of having someone over for him and him only. Izuku scratched the back of his head awkwardly, not used to having someone genuinely interested in what he did for his birthday. The house was always so empty, so quiet, that it had become normal for him to just let the day pass without any fanfare. But now, with Jiro here, it felt different. I don't know, he muttered, glancing around. I usually just read or work on stuff for school. My parents don't really make a big deal out of it, and my siblings. He trailed off, unsure of how to finish that thought without making things worse. He didn't want Jiro to feel sorry for him. Jiro's gaze softened as she observed him. She walked over to the kitchen and opened the fridge, peeking inside. It was just as empty as the rest of the house, and she raised an eyebrow. Looks like no one's even bothered to stock up for you. Izuku shrugged, trying to play it off as if it didn't bother him. It's fine. I don't need anything. Jiro turned around, hands on her hips. I don't know, man. I'm not about to let you spend your birthday alone in this place, especially without even a little celebration. How about we get some food and hang out? I can't be the only one who thinks that sounds like a decent plan for a birthday. Izuku blinked, the offer catching him off guard. It had never even occurred to him to do something like that. Going out with Jiro, having a meal, and just enjoying his day without the usual weight of his family's neglect hanging over him. It sounded too good to be true. But I don't want to inconvenience you, he said hesitantly, glancing at her. It's not a big deal, really. Jiro rolled her eyes and stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Stop that. You deserve to enjoy your day, and I'm going to make sure you do. It's not an inconvenience, all right? Izuku couldn't help but smile at her insistence. Maybe it wasn't such a bad idea after all. Maybe it was time to actually do something for himself, to not let his family's indifference dictate how his day went. Okay, he said with a small nod. Let's go get some food. I think I could use a change of scenery. Good choice, Jiro said, grinning. Let's get out of here. Izuku followed Jiro as she led the way down the street, not sure exactly where they were going but happy to be in her company. They didn't need to say much. It felt like the kind of quiet companionship where words weren't necessary. Eventually, Jiro stopped in front of a small diner, its neon sign flickering in the twilight. The warm light spilling from the windows made it look inviting and cozy, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. How about here? Jiro asked, turning to Izuku with a smile. Izuku looked up at the dinner and nodded. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It was the kind of place that felt like it could offer comfort, warmth, everything he needed right now. Yeah, this looks perfect. They walked inside, and the friendly bell above the door chimed as they entered. The diner was warm, with the smell of freshly cooked food in the air. A waitress greeted them with a bright smile, and they took a booth near the window. Jiro immediately grabbed the menu and started scanning it, while Izuku just sat there for a moment, taking it all in. So, what's the birthday boy in the mood for? Jiro asked, raising an eyebrow as she flipped through the pages of the menu. Izuku glanced at the menu, but nothing really jumped out at him. He wasn't used to picking out food for himself. It was usually something his parents or siblings handled. But with Jiro here, it felt a little different. He thought about what he usually liked but never really got. I'll have the pancakes, he said after a moment, surprising himself a little. It was something simple, comforting. Something he'd never ask for at home, but today he felt like it was okay. Jiro nodded approvingly. Pancakes, huh? Good choice. I'll take the waffles. We'll both have a sugar overload. Izuku laughed softly, the tension in his chest loosening just a bit more. He wasn't sure why, but it felt good to do something spontaneous. Something for himself. The waitress came by shortly after, and they placed their orders. As she walked away, Jiro leaned back in the booth, crossing her arms over her chest. So, what's your deal with your family? She asked, her voice quieter now. Izuku felt the question catch him off guard. He hadn't expected her to ask. It wasn't something he liked talking about. But looking at her, he could see that she wasn't asking out of pity or judgment. She was genuinely curious, genuinely concerned. It's a long story. My family, let's just say they don't exactly see me as important. Jiro tilted her head, her gaze steady. What do you mean? He sighed, realizing there wasn't much point in sugarcoating things. Well, my siblings all have quirks, powerful ones too. They've always been the center of attention. You know how I said I had a quirk? Turns out I was a late bloomer and got it much later than a lot of other kids. I tried to tell them I had one, but they never believed me. For once, I thought maybe they'd notice me. Maybe they'd finally see that I wasn't just the quirkless kid. He paused, his gaze dropping to the table. But they didn't. Hell, my dad told me to give up on my dream and to be more realistic with myself. Jiro's fingers drummed lightly against the edge of the table, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked ready to say something, but she held back, letting him continue at his own pace. It's not just about the quirk, though, Izuku said, his voice softer now. It's everything. The way they treat me, the way they talk to me, or don't talk to me. Birthdays, holidays, school events. I'm always an afterthought. If I even cross their minds at all. Jiro's expression darkened, her hands balling them into fists. That's so messed up. How can they treat you like that? You're their kid, for crying out loud. They should be supporting you, cheering you on, not ignoring you. I knew it was bad, but not that bad. Izuku shrugged, his shoulders heavy with the weight of years of disappointment. I've gotten used to it. It still hurts, but I've learned not to expect much. It's easier that way. Jiro leaned forward, her tone firm but compassionate. Yagi, you shouldn't have to get used to it. What they're doing isn't okay. You deserve better than that. Way better. I know, I am thinking about moving out. It would be better for my health. I get that I just turned 13, but it would be better than living like that, he said. Jiro blinked, momentarily caught off guard by Izuku's declaration. Wait, you're seriously thinking about moving out? At 13? She asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and concern. That's a big decision, Yagi. Izuku nodded, his expression solemn but resolute. I know it's not normal for someone my age, but I've thought about it a lot. Staying in that house, it's not good for me. But if I have to put up with it, then I will. The money is only there in case I absolutely need to move out. They might not give me all the attention that a kid needs, but they still give me a roof over my head. Jiro leaned back, processing his words. She could see the truth in his eyes, the weight he carried despite his young age. Have you thought about where you'd go? What would you do if you did? She asked gently, not wanting to dismiss his feelings but also wanting to make sure he'd considered everything. I've been saving up, Izuku admitted, his voice quiet but steady. Truth be told, I have a job making decent money right now, but I'm trying to start an online business to make a lot more money just in case I have to buy an apartment of my own. Jiro went wide-eyed. That is pretty surprising, being able to manage all of that, and you are 13. Yeah, I know I am a nerd, but I have been making custom notebook covers with heroes on them. It is pretty easy once you get the hang of it, but I put people like Endeavor, All Might, and other heroes on there. I even have had a few people buy them. Jiro stared at him, her expression a mix of amazement and respect. Wait, hold on. You're telling me you've already got customers? Like, actual people buying your stuff? Izuku nodded, a small smile creeping onto his face. Yeah. It started with just a few people in my neighborhood. Word got around, and now I've got a small online store. It's not making a ton of money yet, but it's growing. I'm trying to build it up before I make any big decisions. That's insane, Yagi, Jiro said, shaking her head in disbelief. In a good way, though. Most people wouldn't even think to do something like that, let alone pull it off. Thanks, Izuku said, his cheeks flushing slightly. It's been a lot of trial and error. I had to learn how to use design software, figure out shipping costs, and deal with things like marketing. I even made my own website. It's not perfect, but it works. Jiro leaned forward, resting her chin in her hand. You're seriously blowing my mind right now. Here I was, thinking you were just a shy, quirk-loving nerd, and you're out here running a business like some kind of entrepreneur. Izuku laughed softly. Well, I'm still a quirk-loving nerd. But it's been my escape. When I'm designing or planning, I don't have to think about everything else. It's something I can control, something that's mine. A comfortable silence fell between the two of them for a while, and it was nice. Jiro finally decided to pop the question. Say, Yagi, what is your quirk? She asked, leaning in. You never really talk about it, she said quietly. Izuku hesitated, his eyes drifting toward the window as he considered Jiro's question. It wasn't that he didn't want to tell her, he just didn't know how she would react. His quirk was complicated, to say the least. But there was something about her, something in her steady gaze that made him feel like he could be honest. "Well," he began, his voice quiet but steady, "I would like to show you," he said, extending his hand out to her. Jiro looked confused but trusted him and took his hand anyway. Their hands touched, and Jiro felt a faint warmth spread through her palm. Izuku closed his eyes, a look of concentration crossing his face. Jiro tilted her head in curios, to ask what was happening when she noticed something strange. She felt a pulling gnawing at her, and before she knew it she was standing in an empty area with Izuku next to her. She looked around with curiosity, fear, and a bit of excitement. "What is this?" she asked, looking at him. "This is my mind space," he said, snapping his fingers. Soon Chase, the screen, and the library appeared, making her awe at the appearance of them. "And this is my quirk known as Synthesist. I can create quirks by storing the knowledge of them in here to then create better, stronger, or even weaker quirks if I wanted," he said, making her shocked. "Huh," was all she said. Izuku laughed, which made her annoyed. "I am being serious, you know. You are the first person that I have ever shown this place to. Oh, and this is the man that helps me with it, Chase. He is pretty much an AI of this place, and he helps me create the quirks when I need to." "Hello, Jiro," Chase greeted me in a calm, even tone. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I must commend you on your remarkable auditory quirk. It's a fascinating addition to the collection." Jiro blinked, unsure how to respond. Thanks? So, you're, like, a quirk-making assistant or something?" "Precisely," Chase replied, his tone carrying a hint of pride. "I am an artificial intelligence programmed to assist Izuku in analyzing, synthesizing, and perfecting quirks. Together, we push the boundaries of what is possible within the constraints of quirk science." Jiro turned back to Izuku, her mind racing to catch up. "Wait a second. So, you're telling me your quirk isn't just about copying quirks? You can store them, study them, and make new ones?" "Yeah, pretty much, but I think you should go back before your faces hit the table," said Chase as he pushed them out of the mind space, and they were back in the normal world. Izuku and Jiro found themselves back at the dinner table, their hands still touching briefly before Jiro instinctively pulled hers away. She blinked a few times, trying to process what had just happened, her mind swirling with thoughts. "That was insane," Jiro said, her voice a little breathless. "I mean, I knew quirks could be complex, but what you just showed me, that's on a whole other level." She stared at Izuku, her tone a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "And you're just sitting here like it's no big deal?" Izuku chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his head. "It is kind of a big deal, but I've been living with it for a while now. Honestly, it's the one thing I have that makes me feel like I can actually make a difference, you know? Like I'm not just invisible." Jiro's expression softened. "Invisible? Yagi, there's nothing invisible about you. You just transported us to some mental library with an AI that can literally create quirks. That's as far from invisible as it gets." Izuku shrugged, his gaze dropping to the table. "Thanks, Jiro. That means a lot. But you don't know what it's like at home. My siblings, my parents, they don't see it. Or they don't want to. I've tried showing them, explaining it, but it's like I don't exist. Like I'm still just the quirkless kid they wrote off years ago." Jiro frowned, her fingers drumming against the table again. "They're idiots," she said bluntly. "Sorry, but they are. You're sitting on one of the most incredible quirks I've ever heard of, and they're too blind to see it. That's their loss, Yagi. Not yours." "Yeah, I know, but please promise you won't tell anyone else. If this quirk of mine were to get out, it could cause a lot of problems," he said, looking at her, holding her hand. Jiro felt the weight of his words as he held her hand, his green eyes pleading for her understanding. She could see the vulnerability he tried so hard to mask, the fear of betrayal that lingered beneath his resolve. With a firm nod, she gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "You have my word, Yagi," she said, her voice steady. "I won't breathe a word of this to anyone. Your secret's safe with me." Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, Jiro. It means a lot to me. I'm not sure I could handle it if people started looking at me like I'm some kind of science experiment. Sue, what quirks have you made? She asked, leaning in, fascinated to know. Izuku smiled at the way she looked. My first quirk is called Brain Boost. It continuously always gives an additional 40 IQ to me with no problems. My second quirk is called Cell Search. I can heal people with physical touch as well as me having a faster healing factor. The next couple of hours were just talking about his quirk and how it worked, as well as other topics such as music and Izuku's business he was starting. Soon it was time to go, and Jiro and Izuku walked outside to head home. As they stepped outside, the cool night air greeted them. The stars shone brightly above, and the soft hum of the city echoed in the distance. Izuku felt a sense of calm, though a lingering feeling of uncertainty remained. He just shared something deeply personal, and Jiro had taken it in stride, offering her support without hesitation. That felt good, but it also made him question just how much more of himself he could reveal. Well, this has been a lot, Jiro said, glancing at Izuku as they walked down the street. I mean, I knew you were talented, but this whole quirk creation thing? That's next-level stuff. Yeah, but aside from that, Jiro, I really appreciate what you did for me today. You didn't have to, but you still did it. Thank you for a great birthday. It was the best in a long time. Jiro smiled warmly, glancing at him out of the corner of her eye. I'm glad you had a good birthday, Yagi. And hey, it was the least I could do. You've been carrying so much on your shoulders, and today, well, I just wanted to make sure you felt seen. You deserve that, you know? Besides, I got you a gift, she said, pulling it out. Izuku blinked in surprise as Jiro pulled a small, neatly wrapped box from her bag. A gift? For me? He asked, a bit taken aback. Yeah, you didn't think I'd let you off without a present, did you? Jiro said with a mischievous grin, holding it out to him. Izuku took the gift and they both stopped in the middle of the street. Izuku carefully unwrapped the box, revealing a appealing, sleek notebook inside. The cover was made of deep brown leather, soft to the touch, with an embossed symbol on the front that looked like a star surrounded by swirling lines. It was simple, yet it had a certain elegance about it. He ran his fingers over the edges of the cover, intrigued by its quality. This is really nice, Izuku said, looking up at Jiro with wide eyes. He didn't expect a gift like this, especially considering how much else she'd already done for him. Jiro smiled, a little embarrassed, but her expression was full of affection. I thought it might be something you'd like. I know you've got a lot of ideas floating around, and well, you're always jotting things down on scrap paper or napkins. I figured you might need something a little more official, you know? She gestured toward the notebook, her voice softening. Something to put all your dreams and plans in. A place to write down your future. Izuku felt his chest tighten with emotion as he looked at the notebook. The gesture was so thoughtful, and it spoke volumes about how much Jiro understood him. She didn't just see him as the quirky, sometimes awkward guy trying to find his place in the world. She saw the potential, the drive, and the dreams that had been quietly growing within him for years. I don't even know what to say, Izuku mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. This is perfect, Jiro. I never really had a place to put all the things I want to do, all the things I want to build, and this is exactly what I needed. Well, that is good. You could even use that to put down your hero analyses down if you want, so that it isn't on old yellow paper, she said as she started to walk again. That would be dope, said Izuku, still smiling at his gift. Please do not use the word dope in a sentence ever again, she said. Izuku chuckled nervously at Jiro's comment, his smile widening. Right. No more dope. I'll stick to the classics. Jiro gave him a side-eyed glance but couldn't help the soft smile that tugged at the corners of her lips. Good choice. She nudged him with her elbow playfully. Anyway, I'm glad you like it. But seriously, don't go filling it with just hero analysis. You've got a lot of other ideas too, right? You should write those down too. Oh, I will. 'Cause I am a certified nerd, he said, pointing at himself. Jiro rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress her smile. Certified nerd, huh? Well, at least you're owning it. Soon they arrived at Jiro's house and Izuku still had that same smile on his face at the gift he was given, and Jiro was glad he liked it. "Thanks again for everything, Jiro, you are a dope friend," he said, hugging her and catching her by surprise. She had a slight tinge of pink on her cheeks as she hugged him back. "I thought I told you to not use dope in a sentence." Izuku pulled back from the hug with an apologetic smile, still holding onto the notebook. "Sorry, I couldn't help it," he said sheepishly. "But seriously, you're one of the best friends I've ever had. I'm lucky to have you in my life." Jiro's earphone jacks twitched slightly, and she started to fiddle with one of them. "Well, I am glad you are here too, but let's do our best no matter what we do," she said. Izuku nodded, his expression softening as he met Jiro's eyes. "Yeah, you're right. Let's keep giving it our all. We'll make sure our futures are something we can be proud of." Jiro's lips curled into a small, sincere smile. "Exactly. We can't afford to hold back." She paused for a second, glancing at Izuku as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "And hey, don't forget to take care of yourself too. You can't be the best if you burn out." "Thanks, Jiro. See you later," he said, waving at her. Izuku turned on his heel, the weight of the notebook in his hands grounding him. He glanced back over his shoulder one last time, catching a glimpse of Jiro watching him from her doorway. She gave him a small wave, and for a fleeting moment he thought he saw her smile lingering even after she stepped inside. As he walked home, the city felt different. The usual hustle and bustle of late-night life seemed muted, giving him space to think. The events of the day replayed in his mind, each moment with Jiro standing out like a vivid snapshot. From the easy banter to the heartfelt gift, it all felt surreal. He clutched the notebook a little tighter, as if afraid it might vanish if he didn't. He walked up to the apartment to see that it was locked, which made him sigh. This meant he had to go through the window. Again. He opened the window to his room and crawled in. He could hear some laughter coming from downstairs. He decided to open his door slightly to hear what was going on and peeked down the stairs. "Thanks again, Mom and Dad, that was a great time," said Ichiro, sounding happy. Inori finished laughing and sighed. "Yeah, it was amazing, Dad and Mom. It was a great birthday." Toshinori smiled. "Glad you both enjoyed it, but I would like to give you one more present." "Mom and I thought this would be a good one," he said, standing back from them. Toshinori stood there breathing in and steam filled the room. "Look out, my family, for I am here," he exclaimed, showing him he was all might. "No way!" Ichiro exclaimed, his grin nearly splitting his face. "Dad, you're so cool. How did you even keep this a secret from us for so long?" Inori clapped her hands together, her expression glowing with awe. "This is the best birthday ever. You're a real hero, Dad. The #1 hero." Izuku knew he was all might, but it didn't hurt any less when he saw this type of interaction between them. "Yes, my children, but I need to say something very important to you that must stay between us and no one else. It is about my quirk one for all," he said, making the two of them listen. Inko took a seat next to her husband as her children sat across from them. Izuku too wanted to know about this story. He knew the mechanics of one for all but not the full story, so he still listened in from the top of the stairs. One for all is a quirk that can be passed on from one person to the next. It person that it goes to collects more and more power than the last. Long story short, it's more than a quirk, it's a responsibility, a torch passed down to fight against the darkness that threatens the peace of our world. Ichiro's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "So, it gets stronger with every person? Like, all their strength combines?" "Exactly," Toshinori confirmed. "Every person who has carried one for all has added their own strength and will to it. It's not just about power, it's about the ideals and determination of those who wield it. That's what makes it unique. It's not just mine, it's the collective effort of everyone who came before me." Inori tilted her head, clearly deep in thought. "But why pass it on? Why not just keep it yourself?" Toshinori's expression softened, his smile tinged with a bittersweet edge. "Because no one can carry this burden forever. A few years ago, I was injured and I can only hold this form for so long a day. About 5 hours as of now. And eventually one of you will be the successor for one for all," he said, transforming back down to his skinny form. Ichiro frowned, his brows knitting together. But you're saying one of us might have to take it next? Why us? Because I see incredible potential in both of you, my children. You two are destiny for greatness, he said, smiling at the two of them. Izuku scowled at his father with those words. Either his father was so blinded by his children's power that he couldn't see how horrible they were, or he was an idiot. Probably a bit of both. His elder siblings were the reason why he was bullied near every millisecond. And from this day on, I will be training you two as much as I can so that the two of you can be prepared so that I will know in the future or to pass on this power to, he said, clenching his fist. Ichiro's eyes sparkled with excitement. Train us? Like real hero training? That's so awesome, Dad. He punched the air, already imagining himself in All Might's shoes. I'll make you proud, I swear. Inori, however, looked more contemplative. But how will you decide which of us gets it? Isn't that a huge responsibility to just hand over to one person? Toshinori nodded solemnly. It is, and that's why this isn't a decision I can make lightly. You both have so much potential, and I need to see how you grow, not just in strength, but in character. A hero isn't just someone who fights villains. A hero inspires others, protects those who cannot protect themselves, and upholds the values that make our society strong. That's what I'll be looking for. Ichiro grinned, his confidence unwavering. Well, that's easy. I've got everything it takes. You don't have to look any further, Dad. Inori shot him a sidelong glance. Don't get ahead of yourself, Ichiro. This isn't about who's stronger or louder. It's about who's ready to carry the weight of something bigger than themselves. Ichiro huffed, folding his arms. Yeah, we'll see who ends up being the better fit. From the shadows of the staircase, Izuku clenched his fists tightly, his nails digging into his palms. The bitterness in his heart grew heavier with every word his family exchanged. Destined for greatness? He thought, his teeth grinding. How blind can you be, Dad? You're grooming bullies to inherit a legacy they don't deserve. Do you even see what's right in front of you? Do you even see me? Ichiro and Inori in unison, determination gleaming in their eyes. We won't let you down, they said, their voices filled with conviction. Izuku shook his head. He wiped away the tears forming in his eyes and went quietly into his room. If they are getting serious now too, then I will be even more serious, he said as he opened the book that Jiro just bought him, starting to write down ideas for what he had to do in the future.